Chapter 693. Looking at the rampaging Nami with interest, Dustless couldn't help but look at her in a new light. The fear in her eyes was clearly visible, but she still rushed over without hesitation. In the past, Nami was always evading and escaping from reality. Now her performance made people's eyes light up. Although this performance was extremely brainless in Wu Chen's eyes, it could be seen that she still cherished her companions. His eyebrows were slightly raised and a ripple visible to the naked eye spread out. This magical energy is boundless, spreading rapidly. There is no boundary. It is mysterious and has no substance, but it is real. With Wu Chen as the center, it spreads around and easily covers and swallows Nami, who is unaware of it. In the face of Haushikuhaki, these young chicks couldn't fight back at all. Nami's hair stood up, and she looked at the expressionless Dustless with a slightly dazed look in horror. She instinctively retreated, and some mysterious unknown force invaded her mind. Her spiritual world seemed to be struck by lightning, and she lost her mind for a moment. Her body swayed from side to side in a daze, like a candle in the wind, and she lost control. "What did you do to Nami, you bastard?" Luffy, who realized something was wrong, asked anxiously. "Don't worry, she was just stunned by Haki." With his hands in each other's sleeves, Dustless explained, "My partner was beaten to a pulp. I just thought it would be better if she didn't see it so as not to leave a psychological shadow. I am the only one in the marine so far." Dustless smiled, and his tone was half joking and half serious. "And? Her vitality is really strong, but you should be like her, lying on the ground and sleeping is more appropriate." Turning his head, Dustless noticed that Zoro and Sanji showed signs of recovery, and the same throbbing appeared in his eyes again. A ripple visible to the naked eye, but a mysterious energy fluctuation that could not be touched spread. The two people who were affected by it trembled and fainted again. This mysterious power was domineering and awe-inspiring. Just touching it would cause one's soul to tremble. Luffy looked at the scene in front of him with a dumbfounded expression. He raised his arms subconsciously and could clearly see the hair on the surface of his skin trembling uncontrollably. He knew that this was the case when Dustless deliberately let him go. Otherwise he may end up like Zoro, Sanji and others. 10,000 Mammoth Heavenly Attraction. With a shout, a formless ripple enveloped Luffy. He was startled to find that he had lost his balance and was sent flying. He looked up and saw that a black hole had appeared in Dustless's palm. Rubber pistol. With the help of gravity, Luffy's arm elongated without limit and almost instantly smashed into Dustless's face. "Damn it, it hurts, it hurts." Looking in the direction of the sound, the one who cried out in pain was not Dustless but Luffy. "It is said that armament Haki is the natural enemy of your ability. It seems that you still don't understand what it means." Dustless felt helpless towards Luffy's one-track mind. Only he was so eccentric. Lightspeed kick. The moment Luffy approached Dustless, the flash of light burst out all over his body, and the fierce beam of destruction eroded and swallowed him. Boom boom boom. Flames soared into the air, the ground trembled, and a large pit was clearly visible. Luffy was lying in it, his eyes were white and he had lost his fighting consciousness. Undead Cockroach finally lay down. Dustless breathed a sigh of relief. With his palm facing the direction of Arlong, his body suddenly ignored the existence of gravity and floated strangely towards Dustless. Just as he was about to pull away, Straw Hat Luffy stood up and slapped his face again. "This guy. I have to beat him until he only has half a life left." Dustless was extremely speechless. He glanced at Luffy behind him from the corner of his eyes and couldn't help but sigh. In the next second, his whole body turned into an afterimage and lost its texture. Boom. The fist covered with armament Haki mercilessly smashed into Luffy's lungs, and the force was fierce and strong. Puff. Suffering a fatal blow, Luffy's pupils widened, and his body couldn't help but step back a few steps in succession. His chest was surging and rolling, and white saliva was uncontrollably spat out. Finally, he couldn't bear the burden and knelt on the ground, his hands supporting the ground, not letting himself kneel again. "Your courage is commendable." Dustless nodded and praised and sincerely admired Luffy's amazing willpower. Then he looked cold and said indifferently, "But the behavior is really stupid." After that, Dustless kicked out ruthlessly. Boom boom boom, reaching Dustless's world-shocking realm, even the slightest attack would cause an unimaginable commotion and destruction. However, this kick was not covered with armament Haki. Otherwise Luffy might have fallen. Why didn't you catch me?" Dustless passed by Luffy and used the last of his strength to open his eyes. Luffy's tone was like a man in his twilight years, revealing the exhaustion deep into his soul. Do you think you have the value of being caught by me? Dustless didn't answer and asked. So that's how it is. Maybe it's not worth enough. Luffy laughed at himself. His eyes restored light, and it seemed that he wanted to remember Dustless's face forever and keep it in his heart. His mouth squirmed and he wanted to speak again, but his bad physical condition made him swallow back his words. So live well, your future performance is worth looking forward to. Glancing at Luffy, Dustless's body turned into a gust of wind, and with the complete sunset of the sun, he disappeared into the dark night sky. Killing Luffy is worthless, but letting him live can better disturb the world. The more chaotic it is, the more thoroughly Dustless can take the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. He and the world government and the marine headquarters are all seemingly united, but at the same time they are all different. Chapter 694. Dustless looked at the fainted Straw Hat pirates with a smile on his face. Only by giving these kids pressure can they feel the pressure, so they can work harder to enhance their strength and have stronger strength to help Dustless destroy the world. Staring at Luffy's sleeping face, Dustless couldn't help but feel a little sympathy for him. First, he was used by Shanks to defeat himself, and then he was used by Dustless to destroy the world. This is the sorrow of ants, they can only go with the flow, and they don't even have the qualifications to know the truth. A few days later, on the blue sea, Dustless walked alone. The shadow in the distance was clearly visible, and the tall building rose from the ground, like a pole gun standing on the sea, extraordinarily spectacular and majestic. Looking closely, it is Impel Down. Your luck is really good. You entered Impel Down several times and finally you were released. Dustless stared at the floating fishman Arlong. This guy was locked in Impel Down before, but he was bailed out because Jinbe joined the 7 warlords of the sea, and his life was quite happy. With the support of the 7 warlords of the sea, it was enough for him to be lawless. Hey, this time I will be released again, haha. The fishman Arlong laughed wildly. In his early years he had joined the Sun Pirates, so he had a close relationship with the Knight of the Sea Jinbe. When Fisher Tiger invaded Mariehua to release slaves, the fishman Arlong was arrested by Dustless and joined Impel Down, but later he was bailed out because Jinbe joined the 7 warlords of the sea. This time you will never be released. Glancing faintly at the merman Along who was full of smiles, Wu Chen's tone was resolute and decisive. Why? Hearing this, the fishman Arlong was stunned and immediately asked puzzled. What? The reason is very simple. Staring at the sky in the distance, Dustless whispered, there is no extra reason, just because you were caught by me. Is this explanation enough? His calm face remained as calm as an ancient well. He was like a stone without any extra expression. Well, I have a backer, I'm different from the pirates you caught before. Arlong roared loudly, his tone full of confidence. There are only 2 endings for pirates caught by Dustless, one is to be killed on the spot, and the other is to be locked in the dark Impel Down forever, but he is different. Jinbe boss will definitely bail me out. Arlong raised his head and proudly promised Dustless. Hearing this, Dustless looked at the fishman Arlong and his eyes flashed with disapproval. As a Shichibukai, Jinbe can bail out many pirates, but if he wants to release the pirates caught by Dustless, it is tantamount to daydreaming. Shichibukai, a special ability only works on ordinary people. Sorry, I'm not within their rules and their child's privilege can't bind me. Dustless replied with a blank expression and his tone was unshakable. Even if Jinbe was able to bail out the fishman Arlong, it was also the result of Dustless's nod. Otherwise, the fishman Arlong's head would have been removed. Then with a wave of his finger, the tied fishman Arlong floated up. On the endless sea, the 2 men walked together to Impel Down and soon disappeared into the clouds. As soon as he stepped into Impel Down, an uninvited guest with blue skin appeared in Dustless's pupils. Looking up, it was one of the Shichibukai, Knight of the Sea Jinbe. Oh, you're quite well informed. Looking at Jinbe, Dustless said. It was only a few days before and after the news, Jinbe had already known the news, and it was obvious that he had been waiting for a long time. Someone must have tipped him off. It's none of your business. With a snort, Jinbe said coldly. Looking at the fishman Arlong who was scorched and full of various wounds, Jinbe's brow wrinkled tightly together, and his eyes flashed with displeasure and hostility. He immediately looked at Dustless, and the disgust in the depths of his eyes disappeared in a flash. The person he didn't want to see the most in his life was this guy, no one else. According to the agreement when I became the Shichibukai, I can bail out my men. Now I ask you to let him go. Arlong is my subordinate. Taking a deep breath, Jinbi shouted. If it wasn't for the situation, he really didn't want to deal with people like Dustless, ruthless, strong, and unfathomable. In all fairness, being in the same space with Dustless, Jinbi will feel a sense of oppression that he has never felt before, like an invisible heavy mountain. Let him go? I'm going to say no. Touching his chin, Dustless said playfully. Jinbi heard this, his breathing suddenly became heavy, and he stared at Dustless gloomily, and the murderous intent made the air around him begin to cool down. Filled with cold murderous intent, Dustless's expression remained unchanged, and he still looked at him playfully. If you want to take this kid by brute force, I advise you to save it. The gap between you and me, I think you should understand, Jinbi. His expression suddenly stiffened. Even if he was unwilling, Jinbi still loosened his fist. As Dustless said, the gap is too big and it's tantamount to directly looking for death. This is the agreement between the government and the Shichibukai. I hope you don't breach it. Even so, he still refused to lower his posture and took out the world government, hoping that Dustless would step back. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. Funny, Jinbi, don't you know who I am? You should have seen me in the past. To some extent, I can represent the government. Chapter 695. Jinbi felt deeply helpless. He didn't know where to start. Not only was there a huge gap in strength between them, but his identity was also exaggerated and shocking. The fishman has not even been recognized by the world government. It is a lower class of people. It is a creature with no human rights. Hey, don't forget the original government agreement. Even if I withdraw from the organization, you can't say anything. Jinbi threatened without showing weakness. It's just that Law is full of confidence in Dustless's eyes. Threatening me, hee. I like hard bones the most, Jinbi. Dustless, who was deeply bored, was interested in Jinbi's words, and there was a cynical smile on the corner of his mouth. In fact, you can withdraw from the organization. If you think the Fishman Island can afford this price, you can try. Dustless stared at Jinbi calmly, and he also threatened. How can you be so despicable? The anger in his eyes, Jinbi's fist was clenched again. He is also a veteran of the sea for many years. Naturally, he heard the meaning of Dustless's words. This is a disguised threat. Maybe as long as he withdraws from the Shichibukai, the entire Fishman Island will be devastated. You bastard are so shameless, Jinbi boss, kill him. The Fishman Arlong was not an idiot and immediately shouted hysterically at Jinbi. Idiot, you haven't even read the situation. The cold eyes locked on the Fishman Arlong, Dustless's eyes turned cold, and the strange energy fluctuations instantly swallowed the Fishman Arlong. The pupils that were still shining suddenly turned, and then he fainted. What a superb Haoshiku haki. Jinbi's face was ugly. This moment of Haoshiku, even Jinbi was a little affected, and his whole body trembled uncontrollably. Even though he had been through hundreds of battles, he couldn't help but feel fear and panic in his heart. This profound Haoshiku haki, he can only think of two people, Whitebeard and Red Hair Shanks. Perhaps these two legendary figures can barely compete with Dustless. Looking at Arlong, who was rolling his eyes on the ground, Jinbi's heart was filled with anger and his fists were clenched. Actually, I can also let him go, and at the same time, I can also let your fishman race live safely in the air. With my power and special status, I can do this. Of course, there is no free lunch in this world. All of these promises have conditions. Like a ray of light in the darkness, Dustless's words suddenly made Jinbi see hope again. Jinbi choked with sobs, and his eyes were obviously filled with desire. He knew that Dustless was telling the truth, and with his status, there was no need to lie to Jinbi. With Dustless's status, Dustless could easily do it. What are your conditions? Jinbei's hesitant eyes finally turned into determination, and his voice even trembled. This is very simple, it depends on how you choose, it's completely up to you, Jinbi. Dustless's face swept a mysterious smile, and then the corner of his mouth was close to Jinbi's ear. After a while, Jinbi's face changed greatly, and his hopeful look was replaced by anger and killing intent. He gasped for breath. He didn't expect Dustless's conditions to be so absurd. Are you kidding me? You want me to plot against Whitebeard's father? Jinbi shouted angrily while suppressing the anger in his heart. His words were fierce, and he couldn't wait to tear Dustless into pieces and then throw them into the sea to feed the fish. Dustless actually said such absurd conditions. Kidding? Of course I'm serious. Otherwise, what do you think you can get my bail without doing anything? You're too naive, Jinbi. Dustless heard this and said very seriously. Jinbi and Whitebeard's relationship is not shallow, even compared to the group of sons. If he attacks Whitebeard, the effect will be beyond imagination. Even if Whitebeard doesn't die, it won't be good. If I were you, I would agree to this condition. Whitebeard used to shelter the Fishman Island for other purposes. As a pirate, you must know how cunning Whitebeard is. This business is worth it. If you agree, the Fishman Island will be able to see the light of day again in the future. As for refusing, oh, you also understand. Dustless's mouth had a playful smile. Jinbe's pupils flickered, and he began to calculate the gains and losses in his heart, making a difficult choice. There is no doubt that as long as there is Dustless's approval, the fishmen can live a normal life like human beings in the future. They no longer have to live under the deep sea, and they will always be accompanied by darkness and coldness. However, Jinbe can't agree to Dustless's conditions. No matter what the purpose is, Dustless has sheltered the Fishman Island for several years. This is a fact. Sorry, I refuse your conditions. With a cold look, Jinbe decisively refused Dustless. Staring at Dustless's eyes, Jinbe said without fear, I can't do such a crazy thing. Even if you hold a knife on my neck, I can't raise a butcher's knife to Whitebeard. Jinbe said in a righteous tone, his voice filled with determination and without regret. No, you're wrong, Jinbe, you will agree. Dustless's face was full of darkness, and his eyes were full of strange black light, which was frightening. The flames burning in his eyes were enough to swallow and burn the whole world. No matter who it is, they can't escape the control of Dustless. Your 7 warlords of the sea can appear. This is an inevitable product under my control. In fact, it's just a chess piece that I took advantage of. Do you think you have the right to choose? Don't dream. From beginning to end, you are all chess pieces. Chapter 696. Jinbe's face was full of anger as he trembled with anger. Dustless's words seemed to be a silent statement. Their so-called shichibukai is just a bug that they play with at will without the slightest right to choose. They can only go with the flow and will only be cruelly suppressed if they want to resist. I didn't intend to fight against the government, but you forced me to do this. Staring at Dustless fiercely, Jinbe couldn't stand it and chose to resist by force. Dustless was so arrogant and unreasonable, and the cruel conditions made it difficult for him to accept. He suddenly felt that compared to Dustless, Sengoku and Marine's Akainu is too kind. Look at you, you want to fight. You should know the gap between us. Any resistance is useless. Dustless's eyebrows rose slightly, and he saw through Jinbe's intention. You and I have fought before and you know the result. Struggle is futile. Only if you agree to my conditions, the Fishman Island will be saved. You want me to attack Whitebeard-senpai? Dream on. Jinbe said decisively, his firm tone showed no regrets. Hearing this, Dustless's eyes gradually dimmed, and his expression became colder and colder. God sprinkles the rain of wisdom to the world and you covered it with an umbrella. Idiot move. The moment his voice fell, Dustless rushed out like a storm, rolling up a burst of choking dust, and even because the speed was too fierce, it strangely brought a gust of wind. It came crashing down like crushing dry weeds. I'm not the same as I was before. Seeing Dustless rushing over so exaggeratedly, Jinbe also reacted immediately. It's not his style to wait for death, and a drop of water suddenly appeared in his hand. Drink. With a low shout from Jinbe, the tiny water droplet in his hand instantly magnified countless times and turned into a giant water ball, which looked quite powerful. Fishman empty-handed, profound, Takeshi. As Jinbe's voice fell, a strong shock wave came head-on, and the power was unimaginable, and even the soil buried deep in the ground was scraped out again. It's just an insignificant trick. What's the point? Seeing this, Dustless did not show any signs of slowing down. Instead, he increased his speed without limit. With a sharp whistling sound, he charged forward, completely ignoring the strong impact coming at him. Your trick can only tickle me, Jinbe. Your expression doesn't mean anything. Dustless frowned slightly and said with a slightly displeased tone. Following his line of sight, he saw Jinbe with a smug smile, giving people a feeling that his conspiracy had succeeded. If you're just putting on an act. You're just a blockhead who won't cry until you see the coffin. Dustless's face was replaced by an awe-inspiring color. A shining light appeared in his hand, and the tip of his thumb pointed at Jinbe, and then condensed extremely dense photons. Lasers. The light beam shot out from Dustless's hand and was about to swallow Jinbe, but he calmly avoided it. No wonder you're so confident. Over the years, your observation hockey has improved a lot. It's estimated that your armament hockey is also the same. Dustless nodded slightly, and then his eyes were replaced by ridicule. But what do you think is the use of armament hockey and observation hockey? In the face of absolute strength, no ability can play a role. My means to deal with you are not these. Jinbi shook his head resolutely, and his eyes glowed with a bright light. The thread of conversation suddenly turned and Jinbi said, "This old man is a fishman, and you are a devil fruit user. This is your biggest disadvantage." Disadvantage? It seemed that he was shocked by the boring joke. Dustless's invincible offensive suddenly stopped and asked curiously, "You think you can defeat me just because you are a fishman? This is funny enough. Is it possible that you fishmen are the illegitimate children of the goddess of luck?" Dustless sneered. You'll understand what I mean immediately." After glancing at Dustless fiercely, Jinbi simply jumped into the sea and disappeared completely. The surface of the water only bubbled and disappeared. Dustless knew that Jinbi did not run away, but was brewing something on the bottom of the sea. The whole sea began to throb and tremble. "I thought it would be some grand script. What's the use of such an old trick? There are always exceptions to everything. This trick might be fatal to other ability users, but it's useless to me." With a disappointed sigh, Dustless stood motionless, and he had already guessed what Jinbi's attack was. Boom! The sea trembled and countless super-large water columns rose from the ground, condensing into a majestic water dragon that reached 10 or 20 meters high, which was quite scary. "You are an ability user. No matter what type of ability you have, the sea is your natural enemy." Jinbi's voice was strong, and he roared as if victory was in his grasp. 2 words. Glancing at him, Dustless contemptuously said, "Idiot." Jinbi looked colder, and his big hand fell, and the roaring water column in the sky fell to the ground, and the clean land became a mess and turned into an endless sea. "So are you kidding me? How can he be okay after being eroded by the sea?" The relieved smile on the corner of his mouth stiffened, and Jinbi rubbed his eyes to make sure that he wasn't dizzy. Because he was too excited, his voice was as sharp as metal. This strange scene was unforgettable for Jinbi. Dustless not only didn't feel like he had met a natural enemy, but he was like a fish swimming in the sea, with a face full of comfort and enjoyment. What made Jinbi angry the most was that in the sea, Dustless elegantly swayed his body. His agile appearance was even more vigorous than that of a fishman. Chapter 697. Wuxia swam vigorously in the water. His elegant posture made Jinbi's old face twitch. In his heart he cursed. If it weren't for the years of suffering, his shrewdness would have been practiced to the point of perfection. Otherwise he would have already spat out blood. Even so, Jinbi was still trembling. He felt darkness in front of him. The world in front of him was full of despair. Wu Chen's cheerful wandering posture was mocking his powerlessness in disguise. The trick he had painstakingly thought about for many years became a joke in an instant. Jinbi's inner thoughts were complex, and he had no words to express his bitterness. "Didn't I tell you before, Jinbi?" When Jinbi's old face was black, Dustless's voice suddenly sounded. The voice was very soft and there was no ridicule in it. He said lightly, "Everything has an exception and I am exactly that exception. Even if I have the devil fruit, I am immune to seawater. No, it stands to reason that I am immune to any ability in this world." The seawater that he painstakingly gathered dissipated, and Dustless also came into view. Jinbi's eyes widened, and he naively thought that Dustless would show signs of dehydration. Unfortunately, his wish was destined to fail. Dustless came into view. His face was rosy, his skin was clean and lustrous, and his clothes were dried. He looked healthy and lively. "I wanted to make you happy." "Oh, sorry, it seems that my humanized service has backfired." Dustless said helplessly, "I wanted to deliberately reveal a flaw to make you happy for a while. After all, it would be unfair for you to fight for so many years." Dustless said with a sincere face, but in Jinbi's eyes, it was particularly harsh. "If you can kill me in seconds, just do it." "How is that possible?" Jinbi's sarcastic voice hasn't fallen yet when Dustless appeared in front of him like a shadow, ignoring the definition of the word distance. "Nothing is impossible. In your eyes it's so close, but in my eyes it's just close." The demonic whisper sounded in Jinbi's ears, and then he saw Dustless staring at him coldly. His leg condensed a dazzling light and immediately whistled mercilessly. Lightspeed kick. Jinbi, who didn't have time to react, was directly swallowed by the golden light, setting off an endless explosion, and immediately followed by an endless impact, like a hurricane raging in the blink of an eye. The blazing heat waves were like the waves of the sea, spreading out in an unstoppable manner. Even the ground was scorched yellow and corroded beyond recognition. You've learned a lot, Jinbi. His calm eyes spread some ripples. Dustless's tone had a little appreciation. Although Jinbi's body had been scorched by the high temperature caused by the lightspeed kick, he was still strong and straight like a javelin. Didn't you want to kill me? It seems that you're going to be disappointed. Jinbi looked at him coldly and mocked him mercilessly. It seems that only in this way can he pick up his destroyed self-esteem. Worthy of being one of the 7 warlords of the sea, your strength is really extraordinary. Dustless said with a little emotion, and then the corner of his mouth swept into a smile. Instant kill. If I let you fight directly, what fun would there be? In addition, you don't have to force yourself. You know your current physical condition, Jinbi? Looking at Jinbi's abdomen, there was a clear trace of depression, only a millimeter away from the position of the heart. As long as a little force is applied, Jinbi's heart will be hit hard. Obviously, Dustless did it deliberately. Even if the kick didn't kill him, Jinbi's body was trembling, like a willow branch in a storm, and the whole person felt particularly weak. Don't talk nonsense. Hearing this, Jinbi directly refuted Dustless, and forcibly supported his body, and turned into a cannonball roaring out. When Dustless saw this, he looked indifferent and his footsteps moved inch by inch. The speed was extremely fast and Jinbi, who couldn't be seen by the naked eye, was clearly seen in his eyes. The power of the fishman is amazing, and Jinbi is no exception. The power condensed in his hand is enough to easily defeat a marine battleship. This kind of pure power attack, if you want to break my defense, it's 1,000 miles away. With both hands hugging the sky, ripples appeared in the bottom of his eyes. Wu Chen's dry lips opened slightly. Shinra Tensei. The moment Jinbi touched Dustless, the irresistible repulsion came head-on. His face suddenly changed. Being blocked by this tyrannical force, Jinbi instantly flew out powerlessly. The small mountain in the distance also trembled. Your efforts to never give up are commendable, but don't you think it's stupid and ridiculous to think that you can transcend the mortal world with your efforts, Jinbi? As Wu Chen's voice fell, he turned into a gust of wind and drifted out rapidly. In the void, the looming figure was mysterious. It was obviously close at hand, but it gave people a feeling that it was far away and untouchable. In the blink of an eye, he fell beside Jinbi. Let me go. Jinbi struggled and used all his strength to shake his body, trying to break free from the shackles of Wu Chen. Looking at him, he has been choked by Wu Chen's throat and was lifted in the air without any power to fight back. Jinbi's face was full of shame, and he stared at Dustless with indignant eyes. His eyes were as sharp as a knife, enough to cut people into pieces. Don't stare at me so fiercely. I gave you a chance to choose before, but you abandoned it. What? Do you want to go back on your words now? Wu Chen said with an expression that had nothing to do with him. How about? Now are you tempted by my conditions? Go assassinate that old guy Whitebeard, and if you succeed, you and the Fishman Island will live comfortably in the future. Chapter 698. At night, because everyone had played to their heart's content during the day, it was very quiet at night. Dustless couldn't sleep. After eating the octopus, he was very excited. At this time he sat on the beach and looked at the full moon. He couldn't help but feel a little distressed. At this time he heard a familiar mature voice behind him. Hey, don't you need to sleep? Jeda came to his side, and a hint of a smile appeared in his eyes. After Dustless heard this, he snorted, rolled his eyes and said with a speechless face, Aren't you also not sleeping? You should be thinking about how to go down, right? Yi Jiansuk nodded and scratched his head in distress. He sighed helplessly and said, Yeah, this damn place is really hard to get down. We need to make a barrier so that everyone can get down. After Dustless heard this, he said, That's not a problem, but it's not necessarily a problem for me to go down alone. Yi Jianjia said. Yi Jianjia was speechless. He rolled his eyes and said, Isn't this guy's words the same as if he didn't say anything? You got. As soon as he said this, he heard a voice immediately after. Only to hear a girl's voice, Maybe I can do it. After the words were said, Noelle, who didn't show up much, came to the side of the two wearing a beautiful and slightly reserved swimsuit and a jacket. Noelle's face was slightly red, then she looked at the two's eyes, snorted, turned her head and said, Don't think too much, I'm only helping you for the mission, you lowly people. She was embarrassed when she said this. Immediately the two of them burst out laughing. Then Noelle whispered, It's not a problem if you want to go down, but give me 2 days to practice. I haven't tried to maintain it for so long. As soon as she said this, Dustless snorted and said, Try to speed it up. If you can do it in one night, then do it. I'm going back to sleep. After saying this, he yawned and left. Noelle also knew that her master was impatient, so she was a little distressed. How could one night be enough? How could she maintain it for so long? It shouldn't be possible, right? At this time she hurriedly said to her leader Yi Jinjie, "Leader, how can one night of practice be enough? This won't work." Yi Jinjie yawned and scratched his head helplessly, then said, "Okay, you can do it, I'm going back to sleep." After he finished speaking, he let out a hearty laugh and turned around to leave. Noelle suddenly felt a little speechless. This guy was really, with this thought in mind, he slowly stood up and walked towards a pile of rocks. It was quieter and it was more suitable for using magic. Yi Jinjie Jinjie's S's. After saying this, she quickly took out her magic book and said, "Come, water flow, water creation magic, Poseidon's water ball." After saying this, she immediately created a huge water ball. In front of her, her face immediately showed an excited expression. It was really great, she actually succeeded for the first time. At this time. But only a voice was heard, "Noelle, you're here too." Just as he finished speaking, a strong young man, dragging a huge sword, came to Noelle's side. That was Ashta. Ashta came to Noelle's side, his face full of smiles. At this time, Noelle's face turned red and suddenly her magic dissipated, causing the water ball to scatter on the ground. She immediately turned her head and said in a panic, "What are you doing here? Didn't you go back to sleep?" Ashta quickly said, No, I didn't go back to sleep. I'm still here training. Although that thing is really delicious, I think I must strengthen my training. Otherwise, how can it work?" After hearing this, Noelle nodded in a daze, took a deep breath and said, "I haven't been able to completely maintain the magic in my body." Just as he finished speaking, Asta immediately said, "Is that so? Why don't you try to relax a little more?" As soon as he said this, Noelle's eyes were filled with doubt. She sighed and said, "Well, I don't think it'll work." But at this time Ashta looked at Noelle seriously and said, "No, you can do it. I believe that with your talent and magic power, you can do it. You can do it better than me. Look at me, a guy without magic power can become like this." After Noelle heard this, he was stunned. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, "So it's like this. I'll work hard." After saying this, she suddenly showed a serious expression. Then he started to practice very hard. Ashta held an arrow and comprehended his swordsmanship. He knew that what he learned was not enough. He knew that the swordsmanship he displayed last time was far from enough. He was not strong enough. He deeply understood that in his heart, and he was far from being able to fully control his own power. Therefore at this moment he began to train even harder. Under the moonlight, a pair of people were training hard. Wuxia looked at all this from the side and felt a little gratified in his heart. These two guys had quite a tacit understanding. Thinking like this, he finally yawned and turned his head to sleep very sleepily. Just as he was about to go into sleep, he heard a voice, "Hey!" Wuxia looked up and saw Banasha, who was lying on the side. He blinked in a daze, the corner of his mouth slightly outlined, and said, "Oh, you're not asleep yet?" Banasha snorted, her face slightly blushed and said, "By the way, where did you go?" Dustless saw this woman's appearance and was stunned. He blinked his eyes, it was very strange. Chapter 699. At this point in the battle, Jinbi couldn't help but become angry. His face was red and his neck was thick. It's not that he's a stingy person, but Dustless is really hateful. Not to mention the foul language in his mouth makes people furious. Jinbi thought that his tolerance is comparable to the sea, but at this moment he was still annoyed by Dustless. His lungs were trembling, Jinbi even felt that his lungs were about to explode. I'm telling the truth. You look so scary, no one wants you. I'm afraid that even the Sea King may not dare to eat you, Jinbi. Dustless said very seriously. In the eyes of human beings, Jinbi is indeed not flattering. Die for this old man. Jinbi couldn't bear the ridicule, not because he's too narrow-minded, but because this guy in front of him is too hateful, specifically sprinkling salt on people's wounds. Water strike. Jinbi didn't talk nonsense, he waved his hand and condensed a few drops of strange water balls, completely ignoring the existence of gravity, so strangely attached in front of him. This is one of the powerful tricks unique to the fishman race. This seemingly ordinary raindrop is actually very powerful. This kind of child's trick doesn't work on me, Jinbi. His eyes rotated rapidly, and Wu Chen's eyes suddenly turned into 3 Tomo Sharingan, extremely strange, as deep and beautiful as a blood-red gem. The ripples in his eyes were like the ripples spreading on the surface of the water, with unimaginable power. In an instant, time and space seemed to be distorted by those strange eyes. The world in front of him seemed to be a mirror. The indescribable deep evil energy fluctuations made Jinbi's hair stand up, his whole soul was pierced. Whoosh! Throwing the fear and trembling in his heart, Jinbi swept out the water drops in his hand, with infinite power. The speed was as fast as lightning. It was difficult to catch the trajectory of the movement with the naked eye. Bang, bang, bang. It seems that God suddenly stood on Jinbi's side. These powerful water drops all strangely hit Dustless's abdomen, smashing him out. Jinbi saw this scene and suddenly froze. To be honest, he just wanted to delay Dustless's attack. He didn't want to rely on this trivial trick to repel him. Jinbi's eyes were filled with awe. After many years of fighting, Jinbi knew that this opportunity will not come again, and Dustless's dark red blood stains on the corner of his mouth were obviously not pretending. It's just the result of Dustless's carelessness. Jinbi's body speed was raised to the limit. In just a short moment, Jinbi, like lightning, came in front of Dustless. His eyes were full of killing intent. Remembering the cruel treatment of Dustless, Jinbi's eyes turned scarlet, his arms and his hand into a fist. His strong muscles contained explosive power. Sharkwa's fist. The powerful fist, which was enough to destroy a small mountain, blasted toward Wu Chen's head without mercy. The ground, which couldn't bear this ferocious force, burst open in an instant, as fragile as paper scraps. Dustless's eyes turned white. Obviously, Jinbi's heavy blow had made him unconscious. However, this was just the beginning. Jinbi was not going to give up on such a rare opportunity. At the very least, he had to recoup all the suffering he had suffered before with interest. 7,000-watt roundhouse kick. His strong and powerful arm pulled Dustless up. Jinbi didn't intend to settle things peacefully. His hatred for Dustless was far more than that. 10 years ago, when invading Mariehua, he and his beloved big brother, Fisher Tiger, were crushed by Dustless with overwhelming strength. Now he wanted to take it back. Boom boom boom. With a powerful kick, Dustless flew out like a cannonball. A long and narrow ditch was formed on the ground, extending hundreds of meters away. Dustless was lying in the ditch weakly. "I'm not done yet." Seeing this, Jinbi smiled cruelly, showing a bloodthirsty face. From beginning to end he was a pirate. His tiger body suddenly shook, and countless water droplets flowed out of his body and condensed in his palm. Unlike the previous water attack, this time it turned into an unprecedented big water ball. Fishman empty-handed's profounds Takeshi. With Jinbi's order, this huge and exaggerated water ball turned into an endless impact, which was not much different from a light wave without a physical body, and it swallowed Dustless in an instant. The dust on the surface of the ground was blown away by this impact, and fresh soil buried deep in the ground was simply exposed to the sun. On the other hand, Dustless was already bloody. This should be the end. Seeing that Dustless was not breathing, Jinbi wiped the sweat from his ears and breathed a sigh of relief. However, at this moment a sudden change occurred. Jinbi's spirit was in a trance, and the scene in front of his eyes was violently distorted, as if time and space were flowing backward, and he returned to the beginning. Dustless stood with his hands behind his back, and the corner of his mouth always had a calm smile, and the first impression he gave was elegant and indifferent. How is it possible? Was everything just a dream? Jinbi rubbed his eyes and he couldn't believe it. She glared at Wu Chen. Wu Chen was in perfect condition. His skin was clean and his clothes were intact. On the contrary, he was even flatter than her. Her spirit suffered an unprecedented blow. Unable to bear the burden, she fell to the ground. She didn't even have the strength to move her body. "What you saw before was indeed a dream, a nightmare made by my Sharingan," Dustless said calmly. Everything Jinbi saw just now was an illusion created by Sharingan, and the reality was like this. Jinbi was completely exhausted, and he didn't even have the strength to escape, let alone fight back. Chapter 700. Jinbi's face was as pale as paper. The bones in his body seemed to have been taken away. He fell to the ground powerlessly. He looked up at Dustless, who was walking towards him. According to Dustless, it was all because of the mysterious eyes. "Those eyes of yours. Is it because of him?" Jinbi said with fear. Looking at the strange eyes, he had a sense of panic. "There are such magical eyes in the world. No wonder you are so confident. In the end, you just deliberately want to see me make a fool of myself." Jinbi's tone was filled with self-mockery, loneliness and bleakness. He thought that even if he wasn't Dustless's opponent, he could at least struggle against him. He didn't expect such a ridiculous result in the end. He was like a clown being played around with. It seems that you finally understand the gap between us. Wuxia shook his head resolutely and then said softly, the mystery of Sharingan can't be seen by your mortal body. In fact, when this ability is activated at the beginning, for you who don't know it, you can easily kill it. Then why don't you use this ability? Is there any side effect? Jinbi asked with a little hope, just to get more useful information from Dustless's mouth. Dustless glanced at Jinbi, he also understood what he was thinking. I have already said before, if I kill you directly, it would be too unfair for you who have worked hard for many years, so I let you dance until now. In the Marine, I am the only one who can be so humane. If you meet a Kainu, I think I don't need to say it, you know what the consequences will be. Dustless looked at Jinbi with a grateful expression. Jinbi frowned, he didn't comment on Dustless's words. Among the admirals of the Marine, a Kainu is indeed the most cruel and extreme admiral. Once caught by him, sometimes directly surrendering will also be cruelly burned to ashes by a Kainu. Humph, don't even think about making me sneak attack Dustless. That kind of despicable and shameless thing, I can't do it. Jinbi said in annoyance as he remembered Dustless' purpose. The person he respected the most was Whitebeard. Dustless asked him to plot against Whitebeard. Jinbi's feelings could be imagined. Can't do it? It means that you're rejecting my conditions. That doesn't matter. I've already guessed it. Shrugging his shoulders, Wuxia didn't care. His next sentence sent Jinbi to the 18th floor of hell. However, it's not up to you to do it. You don't have the right to choose. As soon as his voice fell, without waiting for Jinbi to react, his Sharingan began to rotate rapidly. How could you have your way? At this moment, Jinbi suddenly opened his mouth and dense water droplets shot out of his mouth like a sharp sword, stabbing towards Dustless's eyes. The eyes of humans were the weakest and the weakest part of their body. Not only humans but all creatures are the same. I expected you to do this, but you don't know how to be quiet, Ken Susanoo. Chakra overflowed from his body, the golden light flashed and then condensed into human bones, protecting Dustless in it. Kaka. The water droplets bombarded Susanoo's body like cannonballs, but the latter only trembled a little before sinking into the sea like a stone, forever disappearing without a trace, unable to shake it at all. What the hell is this? Jinbi's eyes widened in shock. The moment this terrifying energy fluctuation appeared, his body trembled uncontrollably in fear, and his eyes couldn't help but be filled with despair. Even the surface of his skin was covered with frost visible to the naked eye. As a veteran of the sea for many years, Jinbi naturally knew the extraordinariness of the mysterious trick in front of him. It was just a shadow, but it made him feel a kind of panic. And this weird golden defensive skeleton, anyone can see that it's only a part of the human hand, obviously not a complete state. However, even so, the exaggerated arm made Jinbi dazzled because it was so big that it was beyond imagination, just the arm alone was more than 10 meters high. That's it. As a trophy you have no right to choose your own fate. Removing Ken Susanoo from his body, Dustless's scarlet Sharingan once again floated energy fluctuations, quite mysterious. For the indigenous people of this world, the mysterious energy of chakra is simply incomprehensible. Feeling the horror of those eyes, Jinbi instinctively closed his eyes, but it was too late. His eyes had turned into the same Sharingan as Dustless. It's really busy these days. Time flies, he didn't know how long it had been. Dustless sat on the stone without a care for his image, and his shining eyes gradually slackened. For the next few days he has been busy. He hasn't found a reasonable time to rest. Dustless, Sama, what about this kid? White Zetsu broke out of the ground and looked at the unconscious Jinbi and asked. As for the fishman Arlong, that kid is destined to be locked and impelled down. Without Dustless's permission no one can bail him out, not even the Shichibukai. Don't worry about Jinbi. He has been under my genjutsu, just let him go. Dustless waved his hand indicating that he didn't need to care. He also counted on Jinbi to assassinate Whitebeard, and naturally, it was impossible for him to be caught or imprisoned by him. In this case the previous battle was bound to be in vain. White Zetsu was silent, but then he disappeared into the depths of the ground. This kind of thing doesn't need him and Dustless to worry about. Someone in Impel Down naturally knows what to do. Chapter 701. Time flies, and a few days passed in a blink of an eye. Dustless returned to Mariehua in a daze. As the disguised body of the sacred tree, Dustless has inexhaustible physical strength and almost infinite spirit, but the physical and mental exhaustion is indescribable. After doing something for a long time, anyone will feel disgusted and weak. In particular, Dustless is not a diligent person. After returning to Mariehua, he slept for a day and a night without saying anything. When he got up the next day, it was almost noon. Seeing that Dustless finally regained consciousness from his sleep, Hancock came late to help him dress. Looking at the face of the lotus flower in front of him, Dustless suddenly realized that he had not worn clothes himself for about 10 years, and Hancock served Dustless in his daily life. It has not changed for decades. Unknowingly, Hancock has become an indispensable part of Dustless's daily life. Although Hancock is nearly 30 years old now, she is still a beauty. Her skin is as white as snow. Her natural but very strong body fragrance is irresistible. As long as you smell it, you will be lost in it forever and can't extricate yourself. The clean oval face is as delicate as porcelain, perfect and impeccable, and the shining beautiful eyes are as bright as stars. Hancock's graceful figure looks quite weak on the surface, but her whole body exudes an indescribable noble aura. Her temperament is elegant and noble, and it is filled with indescribable dominance. This little girl has become more and more mature in recent years, and her figure has become more and more attractive. It's really a sin. Shaking his head, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. I am afraid that ordinary people will be swallowed and annihilated by her spring eyes if they look at Hancock. Dustless knows that this is not Hancock's fault, because the sweet, sweet fruit itself has charm. Young master, you are not young anymore, why do you still live like a child? Hancock pouted and said with a little dissatisfaction. Looking closely, he saw Dustless twisting his body like a child as if he was in pain. I'm really not used to wearing this kind of celestial dragon clothes. I'll just change into a set of casual clothes that I usually wear, Dustless said unhappily. Dustless Celestial's etiquette was heavy, and all aspects were extremely particular, including dressing. For celestial dragon's clothes, Dustless felt uncomfortable wearing them. No, otherwise Mariehua and those scumbags will say that you are an alien. Hancock's face was stern and her tone was firm, leaving no room for retreat. Wuxia was slightly stunned. He looked at the dissatisfied Hancock with a slightly surprised look. Her appearance made people's eyes light up. They're just a bunch of trash living under the glory of their ancestors. There's no need to pay attention to them. Dustless waved his hand and said indifferently. Over the years, Dustless has been regarded as the biggest alien and monster among celestial dragons. Most celestial dragons are afraid of Dustless's unprecedented strength and dare not speak out. They can only talk about him behind his back. Dustless doesn't care about this. It's easy to block a person's mouth, but it's difficult to block a person's heart. Anyway, it won't last long and sooner or later it will be eliminated by the law of the jungle. By the way, where did the little girl Yueshi go? She used to be very happy. Frowning slightly, Dustless asked. Yueshi used to come to Dustless early in the morning, taking him to walk around and teasing some celestial dragons who didn't open their eyes. Miss went to bed at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning last night, and now she's still in bed. Hancock said helplessly, the father and daughter are the kind of people who like to stay in bed. Hey, this is really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hearing this, Dustless smiled happily, but in Hancock's ears, it was particularly gloomy. Go and find me a set of suitable clothes. The clothes of celestial dragons are too bulky and not suitable for walking. Dustless, who was uncomfortable, said unhappily. No, master, that group of people will talk about you behind your back. Hancock still can't give in. For her now, Dustless is everything to Hancock. It is a shame to be degraded by the group of incompetent celestial dragons. Are you sure you don't want to take it? Dustless asked with a smile. Hancock nodded resolutely and still refused to give in. Kacha. The violent chakra rushed out of the body. Dustless's celestial dragon's clothes were shattered in an instant, revealing strong and smooth skin. Master, you. Seeing this scene, Hancock couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Suddenly, she felt her body was light and was hugged by Dustless. The hot breath of the man entered her ears and nose. Hancock's face was red, although she and Dustless were not the first time. Disobeying this, master, you must be punished. Dustless's face had a playful smile, and his eyes were particularly explicit, easily penetrating human clothes. Hancock was not a naive little girl. She already understood what Wuxia wanted to do. Her face turned red. She knew that it was still daytime. You are too cunning. It turned out to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hancock struggled with a red face. realizing that Dustless was deliberately like a turtle in a jar. Wuchen didn't care about this and just laughed it off. Appetite and lust were part of human nature. He was really stifled. This period of time, that brat Yushi had been making a ruckus all day long, causing him to not have a suitable opportunity to nourish himself. Now that Yushi was sleeping, such a rare opportunity, Wuchen naturally wouldn't let it go easily. Chakra erupted from the palm of his hand, and Hancock's clothes suddenly turned into debris. Chapter 702. Although there are essential differences between Dustless and other Tenryubito of Mariehua, they are still quite similar in some aspects, such as the aspect of women. Creak. Creak. The powerful force made the big bed creak. In the corridor there was a pleasant symphony, and because it was too intense, it gave people the illusion that the whole villa was swaying with it. This relaxing and intense battle only ended in the afternoon. "Young master, you are too reckless." Hancock's face was red, and pink charming dimples appeared on her face. After a long drought at this moment, she was like a bud waiting to bloom, beautiful and moving. She was like a peerless fairy, moving and tugging at people's heartstrings. The extinguished flame in Wu Chen's heart burst out again uncontrollably. "Young master, Miss should have woken up. I'll serve her to dress." The shy Hancock quickly escaped. Wu Chen's eyes looked as if he wanted to swallow her, causing Hancock to be frightened. She hurriedly fled like a fox. Because of Dustless's abnormal physical strength, Hancock was devastated and walked unsteadily. "This little girl, she is so charming." Opening the window and taking a breath, Dustless's heart calmed down and he stared at the blue sea in the distance. His heart began to wander, thinking about the current situation. The Straw Hat Pirates are now just young fledglings and can't be used. The New World's Jianghu, 4 emperors, has been quite quiet recently. Of course, because Dustless kidnapped Fire Fist Ace, the Whitebeard pirates have been on the verge of going berserk. Many pirates who had a grudge against Fire Fist Ace in the past were suppressed by Whitebeard in bloody means. Dustless-sama. Pure white broke out of the ground and White Zetsu came into sight. 7 warlords of the Sea Crocodile, recently investigating the underground palace of Alabasta. White Zetsu revealed the whereabouts of Crocodile. His tone was unprecedentedly dignified. This guy was an ambitious person. He was as dangerous as his nickname, Sand Crocodile. He usually lurked quietly in the water. Once he launched an attack, it would be a fatal attack. In particular, Crocodile and Dustless still had a great grudge, and it could even be said that they would not rest until one of them was dead. "That kid. He's too naive." "What's the movement on the Marine side?" Sengoku has been paying attention to Crockett's movements and should have made a preparation plan. Dustless was very sure. A few years ago, Sengoku had put Crocodile on the blacklist. Although he was a Shichibukai, Sengoku still treated him specially and secretly sent Marine spies to monitor his every move. Dustless, as a high-level Marine, also knew this. Crocodile is very scheming and terrible. The intelligent Sengoku naturally knows that he joined the Shichibukai for other purposes and has never been careless with Crocodile. Sengoku has noticed the relationship between Nico Robin and Crocodile. It seems that he has sent Kizaru over. White Zetsu said solemnly. He didn't sympathize with Crocodile. This guy was just a chess piece. Robin was actually Dustless's people. Once she was caught by Kizaru, the consequences would be unimaginable. Maybe Nico Robin will be killed directly. White Zetsu's tone was worried. Nico Robin was secretly arranged by Dustless for the Straw Hat Pirates. If she was killed by Kizaru, it means that everything done before may be in vain. Impossible. Sengoku will not kill Robin. It is estimated that he will let Robin secretly interpret the poneglyph and plot the location of the ancient weapon Pluton. Dustless instantly understood Sengoku's intentions. From the beginning, the world government has been chasing after the ancient weapons. If they can catch Nico Robin, they will not kill her, but use her genius brain to find the trace of Pluton. But Robin is my people. It's not Kizaru Ranching's turn to point fingers. His eyes flashed with cold light. Dustless's tone was cold. The overall plan can't be changed because of Kizaru's sudden appearance. Even if he is a Marine admiral, he is not qualified. It is reasonable to say that the subordinates of the Shichibukai can't be detained by the Marine headquarters, but Nico Robin is a special case. There are too many things involved. It is worth Sengoku to take a risk. Even if the Gorosei knows, they won't blame Sengoku. Where Kizaru came from, we just need to drive him back. Thinking of Borsellino's wretched old face, Dustless had no good feelings. Dustless nodded in agreement. Robin is the hidden weapon of the Straw Hat Pirates in the future. She can't be captured by Kizaru. Crocodile can't resist an admiral. They can only rely on Dustless. Then again, Nico Robin is an important wanted criminal of the world government. Although the bounty is low, she is much more important than some pirates with bounties of hundreds of millions. Crocodile is careless. White Zetsu wondered. Crocodile is not an idiot. He knows the importance of Nico Robin. It is not reasonable for the Marines to find her. Do you think Crocodile did it intentionally? Dustless asked with a smile. Then he shook his head resolutely. His tone was magnetic and full of wisdom. No matter what Crocodile does, it doesn't matter. In the face of absolute strength, all conspiracies and tricks are reflections in the water. Crocodile is as cunning as a mouse, but in the face of Kizaru, any of his strategies are useless. Without the intervention of external forces, Robin will definitely be caught by Kizaru. Rumble. At this moment in the quiet room, the sound of the Den Den Mushi broke the quiet atmosphere. Looking up, the Den Den Mushi kept shouting and even its expression was extremely cautious. Dustless's brows furrowed slightly but still walked over. Chapter 703. Wuxia strode forward with his head held high. There was a heroic spirit surging between his brows. Even though this world had been disrupted by him, some general events were still unavoidable. For example, the Alabastan incident is still the same as before. The only change is that the Marine Admiral Kizaru suddenly intervened. However, the distorted script only needs a little correction to return him to his original position. Long time no see, my fleet admiral. Without waiting for Sengoku to speak, Dustless joked. The person who contacted him using the Den Den Mushi was actually Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Sengoku, who was far away in Marin, was silent. He knew that Dustless was deliberately teasing him. He straightened out his thoughts and went straight to the point. Kizaru has rushed to Alabasta. I hope you can rush there too. Sorry, I don't have time. Without thinking, Dustless refused directly. Hearing this, Sengoku's eyes flashed with disappointment, and then he said to the Den Den Mushi, in that case it's a pity, goodbye. As soon as his voice fell, without waiting for Dustless to reply, Sengoku hurriedly hung up the phone. This simple appearance made Dustless unable to react for a while and he stood still like a stone. This guy is so free and easy for the first time. After a while, Dustless was surprised. When he refused other tasks before, Sengoku persuaded him. In Dustless's impression, Sengoku was the first time he was so straightforward. He didn't even bargain. Dustless frowned slightly. As the saying goes, there must be a demon if something is abnormal. Sengoku's behavior is so abnormal. There must be something wrong. It can't be as simple as it seems. Could it be that the old guy is testing me on purpose? Wuxia guessed with a shrewd look. This is the most likely. Sengoku is meticulous. The most terrible thing is not his strength but his intelligence. Sengoku is known as the wise general by the world. After a while, Dustless shook his head slightly. Only Hancock knew about his relationship with Nico Robin. Hancock naturally wouldn't betray Dustless. Gather all your clones in Alabasta. Tell me immediately if there's any trouble. Although he didn't know what Sengoku was planning, Dustless still asked White Zetsu's clones to scatter all over Alabasta. Even if Sengoku's conspiracy was flawless, it couldn't escape his eyes. Speaking of which, how is Crocodile's search for the Nether King? Dustless suddenly changed the topic and asked. Hearing this, White Zetsu shook his head and told him everything. Deciphering the poneglyph is not a trivial matter. It requires a lot of time. I don't think Crocodile has made any substantial progress. He is still playing games with the Alabastan royal family. White Zetsu's tone was contemptuous. Crocodile was much more timid than before. It was estimated that he was scared by Dustless, so he became extremely low-key. It didn't take long for him to deal with the Alabastan royal army. He sighed and felt some sympathy for Crocodile. It was because Mariehua was brutally suppressed by Dustless that a shadow was left in his heart. He began to tuck his tail between his legs and live in the dark day after day. Over the years he rarely heard any news about Crocodile. It's like he evaporated into thin air. All of this was thanks to Dustless. If he didn't deliberately distort Crocodile's mentality, maybe the kid would be happy to be a big thief now, and he wouldn't run to Alabasta, a country full of wind and sand. He even spent several years painstakingly gathering like-minded people from all sides, establishing a huge organization, and finally took the risk of collecting the devil child Nico Robin and looking for ancient weapons. White Zetsu knew that all of this was to retaliate against Dustless for the shame that Dustless gave him. You are a man-made product. Why are you sighing, White Zetsu? Glancing at White Zetsu, Dustless's plain face showed defeat. I didn't expect that the things I created would sympathize with the enemy. Nowadays the world is deteriorating. Dustless looked melancholy and emotional. I don't sympathize with him. I just pity Crocodile's naivety. White Zetsu shook his head. He knew Dustless well. Ancient weapons are legendary things. How can it be so easy to come out? In addition, if he really finds ancient weapons, I'm afraid that the effect will be unsatisfactory. It's unrealistic to expect Pluto to make a comeback. There was a sigh in his words, and White Zetsu's face was full of pity. The outside world didn't know Dustless's secret at all. White Zetsu, who inherited part of Dustless's memory, knew that the master was unfathomable and powerful. If you have to find a creature that can defeat Dustless, only the legendary god. Crocodile, don't worry about him, he's just a pawn. Monkey D. Luffy can deal with him. It is estimated that after defeating Crocodile, Luffy's bounty will increase again. It's just enough to annoy that old man Garp. Dustless laughed gloatingly. As for that guy Kizaru, he wants to capture Robin to work for the government? Dream on. A bright golden luster floated all over his body. Although it was warm, it was full of indescribable heat and destruction. It was terrible, as if it could destroy everything in the world. Carefully feeling it, it was actually the ability of the glint glint fruit, but different from before. The power was different, and there was a huge difference. Unlike Kizaru, Dustless's glint glint fruit had already reached the level of awakening. Chapter 704. In the cold and dark space you can't even see your fingers, and there's a deadly depression. Here it's several times more difficult to breathe fresh air than in other places. It's like a stone is stuck in your throat and there's a feeling of suffocation. Creak. At this moment the heavy metal door was easily pushed open by someone. This metal door that weighed several tons was like a toy. Immediately, a glaring light shone from outside the door. Endless cold fog drifted out of the metal door. Soon after, 3 figures came into view. Looking up, it was Dustless and White Zetsu. The other one was Caesar Kalong, who was responsible for helping Dustless build Pluto. I can't fight with Sengoku now, I can only find another way to make Kizaru go back home. Dustless didn't intend to do the task of stopping Kizaru himself. Long ago he planned for today and prepared a lot of cards. What he was about to use now was one of the cards he prepared. If one looked around, they would discover that this dark and gloomy space was actually a large laboratory. Countless strange creatures were being cultivated here. In the past, after witnessing Vegapunk's scientific achievements, Dustless ordered Caesar to pay more attention to the study of the human body. With his support over the years, Caesar has made rapid progress. Looking straight at the largest container in front of him, Dustless's eyes were filled with expectation, and his pace became a lot faster. The special pool was filled with a green solution, and a floating man was clearly visible. He had long black hair, a handsome appearance, and there was no breath, no heartbeat, and it's not difficult to see that he's a dead man. However, even if his eyes were closed, his whole body exuded an indescribable temperament, and it was full of overbearingness. In front of him he felt as small and powerless as an ant. This person is Uchiha Madara. Although he used to control Madara's body to fight Blackbeard, and at that time he also fused with Dustless's cells. Although all aspects have recovered well, there are still flaws. All in all, at that time, it was just a last-minute preparation. Could it be that Lord Dustless wants to use Edo Tensei? White Zetsu muttered softly. Dustless resolutely shook his head when he heard this. He can use the Edo Tensei on anyone but Madara. This guy's ambition is monstrous. Even if he is dead, he is still a ghost. He longs to return from hell one day with an invincible posture and once again rule the world like a god. After pondering for a while, Dustless said resolutely, just make him into a heavenly axiom. In fact, Dustless still had the corpses of Hashirama and Tobirama. He could make them into one of the 6 paths, but thinking about Tsunade's feelings, he didn't want to do that. Tsunade was now treating him sincerely. If he turned her grandfather into a puppet, it would be too cruel. Besides, compared to Hashirama, Uchiha Madara wasn't bad. With a slight shift of thought, countless black iron rods appeared in his hands. This guy is my perfect test specimen. Do you want to ruin him like this? Looking at the iron rods in Dustless's hands, Caesar's face was full of reluctance and heartache. Although he didn't know what Dustless was doing, he was sure that he was using his precious test specimen for experiments. Uchiha Madara's body was given to Caesar by Dustless, and it took him several years to maintain the current state. Of course, it was also thanks to Dustless's cells that he was able to repair it so perfectly. You only dealt with the first few processes. The final processing process will be done by Dustless-sama. Turning his head and glancing at Caesar, White Zetsu said indifferently. He has always been respectful to Dustless, but for the other subordinates of Dustless, White Zetsu maintained equal status. Humph, the greatness of science, you know nothing. This is my perfect work. Seeing White Zetsu's arrogant look, Caesar shouted unhappily. White Zetsu just glanced at him and then he was silent. He was created by Wu Qin, and he also inherited some of Wu Chen's personality. He was a man of few words and didn't like to talk nonsense. Especially with Caesar, who was a neurotic person, he had nothing to say. Pucci. The black iron rod was inserted into Madara's body, and it contained unimaginable power. Madara's lifeless body moved strangely. How is this possible? Caesar's eyes widened as he witnessed Madara's slightly twitching body, and he couldn't help but roar out loud. Shut up, I can't concentrate. Slightly squinting his eyes, the black iron rod in his hand appeared again, and once again, it went deep into Madara's body. This time the location was the head. What's more strange is that Madara's eyebrows were slightly raised, and then under Caesar's stunned gaze, he opened his eyes. He's a zombie. Seeing this, Caesar screamed sharply with a roar of steel. Is this guy the reincarnation of God? Can he bring people back from the dead? Caesar's body trembled, and his pupils expanded to the largest extent in his life. His eyeballs were even about to burst out of their sockets, and they were permeated with dense blood. You're the world's #1 scientist all day long, and you're so ignorant. White Zetsu took the opportunity to satirize. When it's time to hit the face, decisive counterattack. This is also a characteristic inherited from Dustless. Caesar, however, didn't care. He was panting like a cow and his face was flushed. Caesar's eyes widened and he stared at this unprecedented scene. He lost his mind like a child, quietly waiting for Dustless to perform a miracle. Chapter 705. These black iron rods were undoubtedly the tools used by Dustless to control Madara. They were created by Dustless's will, and without them Madara couldn't be controlled. Oh, I'm afraid you never dreamed that one day you would be transformed into a puppet by me? Dustless looked at Madara with a smile on his face, and he couldn't help but sigh. Dustless suddenly remembered the young him in the past. At that time he was just a pawn working for Madara. Looking back now, Dustless felt like he was in a dream. Even though he was 50 years old, every time he thought about it, he was still confused. So powerful. Caesar's eyes were shining, and the way he looked at Dustless changed dramatically. Before, it was just simple respect, but now it was like looking at a god. In his eyes, a human being with a mortal body would not be able to reach such a level. It's normal for Caesar to have such an idea. As a native of this world, he doesn't understand and has never seen chakra, a power that he has never been involved in. After a while, Madara was full of catheters, and under Caesar's surprised gaze he finally stood up. It's the first time I'm using it, although it's not smooth. But it should be no problem to deal with Kizaru. Dustless said calmly. Kizaru was just an admiral of the marine, so it wasn't difficult to stop him. Dustless glanced at Caesar, who was fascinated and puzzled, and couldn't help but shake his head. Naturally, he understood what this old guy was thinking. This wasn't a product of science but his will. It wasn't something that could be understood by the word science. Yin-yang release was beyond scientific knowledge. Plop. At this moment, with the sound of water flowing, Madara stood up from the pool, and his whole body was full of catheters. His whole body was expressionless, no different from a machine. Dustless wasn't an Uzumaki Nagato. Even though it was his first time using it and he wasn't very proficient in some areas, he could still control Madara from a distance. 1 meter and 10,000 meters meant the same thing to him. He was not like Nagato, who sneaked up on Muyi and insisted on running near Muyi to strengthen his control of Heavenly Way. Mariehua only needed to control the Heavenly Axiom. As for the other 5, maybe Madara isn't enough, so it's better to test it on someone else. White Zetsu tentatively suggested. Hearing this, Dustless glanced at him faintly. Driving Kizaru away doesn't mean killing him. 1 tendo is enough to deal with him. Caesar listened in confusion. He didn't understand the conversation between Dustless and White Zetsu, but he understood the general meaning. When these things were in their complete state there should be 6 of them. Is it only perfect if there are 6 of them? Caesar's tone was doubtful. Although he didn't know the strength of this Uchiha Madara in front of him, one thing was certain. Something that Dustless personally made would definitely not be weak. And listening to Dustless's previous words, he wanted to use this thing to deal with Kizaru, who was a marine admiral. You're quite clever. White Zetsu joked. If he could find an opportunity he wouldn't mind hitting Caesar. This guy relied on the fact that he built Hades for Dustless. He usually thought that he was superior and arrogant. Not to mention White Zetsu, even Doflamingo sometimes didn't put him in his eyes. Wu Chen's forces could be short of anyone, but Caesar could not be short of. Humph. Caesar looked at White Zetsu fiercely, and then asked with a face full of curiosity. This kind of thing can you? No. Before Caesar's voice fell, Dustless directly said. He understood what Caesar meant. It was estimated that he wanted to ask what kind of thing the black conduit on Uchiha Madara's body was. In this world, not everything can be explained by science and not everything can be evolved by science. This is the gap between strength. White Zetsu despised. The yin-yang release was mysterious and abnormal, beyond the world's understanding. Even Chakra didn't know what it was, so Caesar couldn't understand it. Caesar's face was red and he stared at White Zetsu and said, Science is omnipotent. The development of civilization, to a certain extent, can even bring people back from the dead. You're right. For Caesar's words, Dustless nodded in agreement. There is a saying that every profession has its own master, such as Hades, an ancient weapon crowned with the title of God, is a product of science and technology. It can't be underestimated and it was made thousands of years ago. In short, there is no limit to everything and there is no absolute. Everything has its own way and when it evolves to the extreme, it will turn into something magical. Caesar looked at White Zetsu and gave him a look of exultation. He looked arrogant, and his excited expression was full of provocation. These two guys. Seeing this scene, Wu Chen was speechless about these two buffoons who liked to bicker. Then he swaggered away and left the dark laboratory. At the same time, Uchiha Madara quickly put on his clothes and walked out of the laboratory with a cold expression. For Crocodile, Dustless naturally wasn't interested in such a small character. The purpose of creating Uchiha Madara was to stop Kizaru. Otherwise Robin would be caught by that wretched old man. Dustless also counted on Robin to be an undercover in the Straw Hat Pirates, so naturally he couldn't do as Sengoku wished. In the future when it comes to cleaning up the Marines, Tendo will do it. It will save me the trouble of doing it myself. With a gloomy smile, Dustless said. Although he was also an admiral of the Marine, his purpose was different from Sengoku's, so he couldn't let Sengoku do what he wanted. Chapter 706. As soon as he stepped out of the dark laboratory, an anxious figure came into view. The newcomer's skin was wheat-colored, with golden hair and fiery red feathers all over his body, exuding a gloomy and depressing atmosphere. The corner of his mouth outlined an elegant smile. Dustless recognized the person in front of him, or rather, in the whole world only Doflamingo dressed like this. He is also Dustless's dedicated henchman. Many things are handled by him. For example, Doflamingo, who is over 40 years old this year, is at the level of an admiral and is quite powerful. At the moment, his face was full of anxiety and his brows were wrinkled. Obviously, something bad has happened. I heard that you have been living a good life these days. Before Doflamingo could speak, Dustless spoke first. Because Doflamingo is one of the 7 warlords of the sea, he alone controls the business of both the black and white side, and no one dares to stop Doflamingo, so his business is getting bigger and bigger. He has been living a good life in recent years and is very carefree. Dustless also turns a blind eye to this. Doflamingo secretly sells all kinds of firearms and a large number of artificial devil fruits. It is estimated that he has earned at least tens of billions of berries over the years. Of course, people like Dustless and Doflamingo have a diluted concept of money. It is just a number. The most important thing is that a large number of devil fruits and smuggled firearms can make the world chaotic. This is also the reason why Dustless indulges Doflamingo. Doflamingo's old face suddenly collapsed. He took off his sunglasses, revealing a worried face. He looked sallow and emaciated, and it wasn't hard to see that he had been unusually troubled recently. The side effects of the artificial devil fruit army formed by 100 Beast Kaido came out. He killed the subordinates I sent to accept berries and also shouted to expose me for selling fake goods. The artificial devil fruit that Doflamingo sold to Kaido was a defective product developed by Caesar. It has a lot of side effects. After a long time, it will drain a person's body and drain the host's own energy. It will not take long for the host to die of exhaustion. Selling fake goods. So what? You're making money out of nothing, Dustless said with a straight face. Anyway, there is no guilt in it, and the berry that Kaido sent was just ill-gotten wealth. That bastard, he said that he would inform the Marine headquarters about the news of me selling artificial devil fruit. Doflamingo gritted his teeth and roared. That old man is quite smart. Dustless nodded slightly, secretly praising Kaido's quick-wittedness. Privately developing artificial devil fruits was not a small crime, especially when Doflamingo sold it to the world's pirates, even the Revolutionary Army's troops and some war-torn kingdoms. The world government would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. Even the Shichibukai could not bear the anger of the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. Selling the artificial devil fruit to the Yonko, 4 emperors, was not a joke. It's a trivial matter. If he wanted to tell the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, and the Marine headquarters, what you did was already in broad daylight. Even if I cover up for you, it's useless. Dustless explained with a smile. Doflamingo was stunned. Indeed, since Kaido did not inform the government and the Marine, it means that there is still room for maneuver. It's estimated that he wants the real thing, not the previous fake products. Dustless's eyes flashed. His eyes were shining as clear as water. Dustless naturally knew what Kaido's idea was. It was nothing more than to truly complete the artificial devil fruit. He did not expose Doflamingo but quietly explained everything. After all, only Doflamingo has artificial devil fruit in the world, and Kaido does not want to lose this only source. How can that be? That guy is ambitious. If we give him the real devil fruit, he will definitely repay kindness with ingratitude in the future. He will use the artificial devil fruit to deal with us. This is supporting the enemy. Doflamingo struggled. He hated Kaido very much. Now that he wants to support the enemy, it's better to kill him. What about supporting the enemy? Look at the long term. Dustless said without changing his expression. Even if he gets the artificial devil fruit, Kaido will form a devil fruit army to attack the Marine and other pirates. For the time being, it will not be Dustless's turn. And funding Kaido to beat the Marine and other pirates, Dustless doesn't think there is anything wrong with it. This is also a disguised use. Using Kaido to weaken the strength of the pirates and the Marine will reduce the resistance when they rule the world in the future. What if that old guy doesn't know? You also know that the higher the status of a pirate, the more greedy they are. Doflamingo still struggled. Doflamingo had a bone-deep hatred for Kaido. Back then he was beaten by Kaido until he was looking for his teeth on the ground. If it wasn't for Dustless arriving in time and saving him from the tiger's den, perhaps many years ago, Doflamingo would have already gone to the underworld to report. If that's the case, let him shut up forever. Behind Wuxia, Uchiha Madara's eyes shone with a cold light, and his whole body exposed an extremely powerful aura. His whole body's temperament was like an unsheathed sword, invincible and extraordinarily overbearing and oppressive. It's obviously a dead body. How can it be? Doflamingo's face was full of horror. Looking at the long black hair of Uchiha Madara, he felt a heavy oppression, making his forehead uncontrollably break out in cold sweat, and his face involuntarily showed fear. Doflamingo felt a fatal threat from this man who was covered in all kinds of black iron rods. It was as if he had met his legendary natural enemy, which made him fearful and panicked. Chapter 707. On the Blue Sea, several battleships were moving quickly. Kizaru stood proudly on the ship, his mouth leisurely blowing smoke rings, his face relaxed, wearing huge glasses. His demeanor looked quite comfortable and comfortable. Thinking of the comfortable and leisurely life now, Kizaru's depression also disappeared. It's really not easy to climb to this point. It took a lot of hard work and now the rain is finally over. It's a sunny day in life. Although he's already half 100 years old, he's still young compared to some big pirates. Admiral Borsellino, we've been sailing for a night. Do you want to find an island to rest? At this moment, a military officer came to Kizaru and tentatively suggested. Looking around, the entire fleet's personnel were tired like dead dogs. This? Kizaru's eyes flashed with hesitation. Thinking of the importance of Nico Robin, he wanted to refuse directly. But then he looked around and saw everyone's weak appearance. He also knew that it's too much. After all, these were all ordinary Marines. There was a world of difference between their physique and the generals as well as all other aspects. After about half a day of travel, Kizaru and the others came to a deserted island. It was quite desolate and there were no birds or beasts, but the size of the island was beyond imagination. A group of soldiers ran to the island to rest, and some even directly vomited. Ah, this group of young people is really useless. Seeing this scene, Kizaru couldn't help but shake his head. Compared with his humanoid weapon, all aspects are 1,000 miles away. The humanoid weapon, which is designed with Bartholomew as the basis, has now begun to be mass-produced. In order to prevent accidents, Kizaru brought a lot of them this time. It's just that these are machines and they don't need to get off the ship, so they stay on the battleship. Kakaka, at this moment, on the shore of the nameless island, strange ripples suddenly splashed on the sea surface. It spread rapidly like a wave, and in an instant, it spread hundreds of meters away. Immediately, under everyone's gaze, several marine battleships slowly sank. Even with Kizaru's calm temperament, he was stunned. He looked at the scene in front of him with a surprised face, and immediately his wretched old face twitched. Although he didn't know what was going on, there was only one possibility for this strange supernatural imagination. They were attacked. "You've got guts." A cold light emerged in his eyes. Kizaru wiped his glasses. His squinted eyes enlarged, emitting a dangerous light. His eyes looked straight into the depths of the sea, and immediately his whole body emitted a golden flash. His whole body gradually collapsed, losing its texture, and a large number of photons all floated to the clouds. Using the characteristics of the glint-glint fruit, Kizaru was able to float in the air for a short period of time. In just a few seconds he was able to condense extremely dense flashes of light. The dazzling narrow light pulsed in Kizaru's palm, covering a surprisingly large area. Kizaru knows that the ship has sunk and there is no possibility of salvaging it, which means that the mission has failed. If they don't catch the culprit, Sengoku will inevitably scold them. Yasukani no Magatama, the densely packed golden light bullets poured down like ants, swallowing the entire sea in an instant. The sinking warship was instantly smashed into pieces. Bang bang bang, the earth trembled violently, raising smoke and dust that covered the sky. Looking straight ahead, there were more than a dozen shadows in the hazy smoke and dust. All of them escaped from the Navy's sunken warship. However, in the face of Kizaru's exaggerated attack, he didn't care about them. Whiz whiz whiz, the golden light bullets were mighty, annihilating everything in the world. Even if the warship was disintegrated, the raging golden light bullets did not stop attacking, but went straight to the dark shadow in the depths of the sea. Under the perception of observation haki, Kizaru clearly perceived the location of the dark shadow. Smart. The mysterious dark shadow on the bottom of the sea raised a playful arc. Looking at the light bullets that were about to hit him into a sieve, his face with a black catheter swept a sneer. Bang! At the bottom of the sea, it was as if he was on land, ignoring the gravity of the sea and jumping out of the sea. This guy. Who the hell is he? He can float in the air. Kizaru's eyes widened and his dry mouth was round. He asked himself that he had fought countless pirates in his life and witnessed countless strange abilities, but it was the first time he saw someone who could fly out of thin air. Quietly staring at the dark shadow in the sky, Kizaru keenly smelled an unprecedented danger. He put away his sloppy appearance and flipped through the information in his mind, but he had never seen or heard of this character. Looking up, the mysterious man's back was facing Kizaru. He could only see his side, his long black hair dancing in the wind, wearing black gloves, wearing red armor. His whole body was filled with a cold breath of decay. The invincible momentum and the spirit of despising all things made Kizaru stunned. Such an arrogant guy is really rare, Kizaru said in a frivolous tone. Even so, Borsellino's face flashed with cold light. He was a marine admiral, but the mysterious man in front of him seemed to treat him as an ant, as worthless as a cabbage on the roadside. Whiz whiz whiz, at this moment, there was a violent vibration in the smoke, and there were as many as a dozen pacifists, big mouths and dangerous eyes condensed in their mouths. The source of this trick was Kizaru's laser, of course because it was not his body, it was much weaker. Naive? At this moment, the mysterious man in the sky suddenly turned his head, revealing a purple eye, with a wicked smile on the corner of his mouth, staring at the roaring flash, the corner of his mouth slightly opened. Wheelgrave, border prison. Chapter 708. There is no doubt that this strange dress, the only person in the world who has Rinnegan and can use the unparalleled ninjutsu like Luin Tomb, Border Prison, is Uchiha Madara, who was made into Tendo by Dustless. There is no one else. Luin Tomb, Border Prison. As Uchiha Madara's voice fell, the void suddenly burst, a violent turbulence and energy fluctuations visible to the naked eye rapidly expanded and extended, annihilating the light beam in an instant. Even the clouds floating in the void were eroded and erased due to the overbearing power of this attack. This guy actually broke the pacifista's laser in one go? Kizaru's tone was surprised, and even because of the incredible reason, his mouth trembled slightly, and the whole person lost his usual calmness. He understood the power of the pacifista. Especially the laser of the laser, which is his glinting fruit. Kizaru naturally understands its power. Even if a pirate with a bounty of more than 100 million berries is hit, he will be killed in seconds. Tell me your name. Kizaru was not angry, his voice was very soft, but it gave a kind of pleasant feeling. The whole person was like the grandfather next door. All in all, Kizaru at this moment gave people a very strange feeling, and even the marine on the side was puzzled. Uchiha Madara. Uchiha Madara looked at Kizaru with his hands crossed in front of him. Tendo Uchiha Madara raised the corner of his mouth slightly, and then his lips opened slightly, calmly saying his name. Uchiha Madara? Kizaru, who had never heard of this name, frowned, and his mentality that had not been angry for many years flashed anger, and there was always an unknown fire burning in his heart. He didn't know why, but he always felt that Uchiha Madara's every move and every word was full of contempt, as if nothing in the world could be reflected in his eyes. Kizaru, this kid is smart. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua, laughed. Others may not know what Kizaru meant, but he understood very well that Kizaru actually stretched out his intention to win him over. After all, Uchiha Madara has no bounty, and his strength is not bad. If he can be pulled into the marine, it will be a blessing. The idea is beautiful, but the reality is really cruel. The mission is complete. It's time to retreat. Completely ignoring Kizaru, Uchiha Madara showed everyone his back. His simple appearance made everyone stunned. Kizaru and the others felt worse than eating 10 pounds of flies. In front of this man they were all insignificant pawns. You want to leave? How can I explain this to Sengoku? After several provocations, Kizaru's heart was as calm as an ancient well. His flame index also increased. His face was cold, and he immediately turned into a golden photon and whizzed out. The sharp whistling sound in the air made one's scalp tingle. Such a big formation. Do you think that I wouldn't notice you and purposely go easy on you? Uchiha Madara's footsteps stopped as he noticed the loud noise behind him. He muttered to himself as he formed a seal with both hands. In just a blink of an eye, a simple earth release ninjutsu was completed. Earth escape, earthquake core. The earth behind Uchiha Madara trembled, and a solid earth wall instantly condensed, separating Kizaru and Uchiha Madara. How can such a scam work? With a sneer on his face, Kizaru's hands suddenly condensed the outline of a golden sword. Kusanagi Cloud Sword. It was a divine sword that could cut through iron as though it was mud. The sharpness of the sword was enough to cut through meteorites. The blazing heat that emanated from the sword was something that no one dared to underestimate. As long as one came into contact with it, they would be melted into nothingness by the blazing heat. Kacha. The wall that rose from the ground was penetrated by the flash of light, and then shattered with a bang. Please go to the Marine headquarters with this old man, otherwise... Kizaru's words stopped abruptly as the blazing temperature hit his face. He looked up and saw a giant fireball roaring in front of him. Due to its terrifying power, the ground was scorched yellow and hideous cracks appeared. It was no different from a riverbed that had been dry for several years. In an instant, it swallowed Kizaru and passed through his body. So strong, looking at the fireball penetrating his body, Kizaru couldn't help but take a deep breath. Perhaps if he didn't launch his elemental transformation ability at the last moment, he would have been seriously injured. This guy. What kind of ability is he? Paramecia? It shouldn't be. Logia? It doesn't seem to be. Kizaru carefully looked at Tendo Uchiha Madara, and his clear mind fell into a dead end. It was the first time he met such a tricky enemy. However, thinking of his huge advantage, Kizaru's old face changed faster than flipping a book. The biggest advantage of the glinting fruit is its terrifying speed and powerful strength. With a golden luster, Kizaru completely ignored the distance. In less than a blink of an eye, Kizaru jumped close to Uchiha Madara. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua controlling the heavenly axiom, just smiled indifferently and was unprecedentedly calm. Speed is power. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? The voice of the vicissitudes of life rang in Uchiha Madara's ears, and he looked at Kizaru's calf that had condensed a dazzling light. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara just smiled disdainfully, and the black ball that had quietly condensed in his hand was thrown into the sky. Gravity is the natural enemy of everything. Even light is no exception. Have you ever been swallowed by gravity? Admiral Borsellino? Chibaku Tensei. Chapter 709. The black sphere in the sky looked harmless and small enough to be ignored, but what frightened Kizaru was that his whole body was out of control. Instinctively, he wanted to turn into a flash of light and slip away, but the deadly gravity made him afraid to take risks, and an inexplicable voice in his heart warned him not to elementalize. Ka. The earth kept trembling and jumping like a swamp, extremely fragile. Boom boom boom. He didn't know how long it took, and finally the earth, which could not withstand this gravity, burst open and a huge gap appeared. The ground was easily torn apart by the penetrating gravity of Chibaku Tensei, leaving a terrible gap. Could it be that? What a joke. For the first time in his life, Kizaru's eyes showed panic. Under this boundless gravity he couldn't move an inch. His body was invisible, as if he was carrying a mountain without a physical body, and breathing was 100 times more difficult than usual. He vaguely understood Uchiha Madara's intention to use the small black sphere as the core to form an unprecedented giant meteorite. No, I'm just sitting there waiting for death. The hesitation in his eyes turned into determination as he stared at the sphere in the sky that was about to swallow the world. Kizaru was scared, and the void was obviously changing. The terrifying gravity could even distort space and time. Once he was taken in by that thing, he couldn't do anything even if he tried his best. Without thinking, his body directly turned into a photon and whizzed out. What can you do under the gravity of Chibaku Tensei? Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua, sighed helplessly. Light was attracted by gravity. If Kizaru had been prepared in advance, he could have escaped, but he was unaware that he had been covered by gravity and was destined to be swallowed by Chibaku Tensei. The elementalized Kizaru not only did not escape the swallowing of Chibaku Tensei, but he was also quickly crushed by Chibaku Tensei. At the moment when he was about to be crushed, a little crystal mist suddenly appeared in the air. This is ice dregs? Dustless, who was controlling Uchiha Madara, was puzzled as he caught the falling crystal transparent body. Boom boom boom. The void flashed with a dazzling fire, and the broken walls immediately fell under the pull of gravity. Tendo Uchiha Madara turned his head slightly, and the figure behind him was looming in the smoke and dust. Rinnegan rippled. Far away in Mariehua, Dustless's doubts also disappeared. No wonder Sengoku called to deliberately test me. It turned out to be for this reason. It's a pity that he didn't wait for me, but he waited for Uchiha Madara. Dustless gloated with the corner of his mouth slightly raised. It's really unfortunate to meet two admirals, Tendo Uchiha Madara said with a headache. Others couldn't see the blurred reflection in the dust, but Uchiha Madara could see it clearly. His tall body was nearly 3 meters tall, not far from Kizaru's height. I don't hear any regret or misfortune in your tone. Please at least tell us your purpose for attacking the navy out of nowhere. At least we can give the fleet admiral an explanation. Akiji walked out of the smoke with a lazy face. His expression was sloppy, but his voice was extremely cautious. Before this, how did you know the weakness of Chibaku Tensei? Turning his head, Uchiha Madara asked with interest. Hearing this, Akiji shook his head and shrugged. It turned out to be Chibaku Tensei. Its power is as arrogant as its name. It's not a weakness. I was just taking a gamble. I couldn't just sit there and wait for death, so I directly attacked the black sphere. As for whether I could save Borsellino or not, it would depend on his luck. But now it seems like I made the right bet. Uchiha Madara heard this and nodded sincerely. The weakness of Chibaku Tensei was to attack the black sphere before it was formed, so Chibaku Tensei would collapse by itself. At the same time, golden photons condensed around Akiji. At first it was a little bit and then gradually increased, converging into a tall figure with the word justice clearly visible behind the white cloak. It was Admiral Kizaru, but because of the demonic scene just now, his face was a little pale and bloodless and he was still in shock. Presumably, it was the first time Kizaru had experienced such a horrible scene in recent decades. It's really unpredictable. The person I was waiting for didn't come, but it seems that I'm waiting for a more powerful person. Really, why are powerful enemies always on the opposite side of the marine? By the way, you haven't returned to the purpose of attacking the marine, Akiji asked while looking at Uchiha Madara's eyes. Dustless Mariehua's mouth curled into a smug smile. The person he was waiting for didn't come. He was afraid that he was talking about him, but unexpectedly he was waiting for Uchiha Madara. Reason? What reason do you need? When a pirate meets a marine or a marine meets a pirate, what reason do you think is needed to fight? What other reason do you think is needed? Facing the two admirals, Uchiha Madara replied calmly. His plain tone was exactly the same as the dialogue between ordinary people, maintaining calmness. In the eyes of Kizaru and Akiji, it was very strange. Don't say that they met two admirals at the same time. Even if they met one of them, the pirates often fled without fighting. Be careful, this guy is very evil, Kizaru said cautiously. What kind of ability does he have? Akiji asked, thinking of Madara's ability. Hearing this, Kizaru's face suddenly stiffened, and he shook his head with a pale face, and then said in a half-joking, half-serious tone, maybe in the future there will be more devil fruit, and the ability user himself is this guy named Uchiha Madara. Chapter 710. Hearing Kizaru's words, Akiji's face changed slightly. Perhaps Kizaru was exaggerating, but he is also one of the most powerful people in the Marine headquarters. For Kizaru to say such words, it can be seen how terrifying Uchiha Madara is. Akiji was a little more wary of Madara. This yellow monkey is quite clever and has rich combat experience. He deserves to be a Marine admiral. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua, nodded secretly. He just tried to use armament haki and it was easy and simple. Strangely, he couldn't control Uchiha Madara to use armament haki. It was the same as the original Naruto world. Dustless used the body of elephant turn technique, but he couldn't launch the ability of glint glint fruit. It's probably because of the different power systems of the two worlds. Uchiha Madara didn't touch armament haki, but it doesn't matter. Shaking his head, Dustless instantly understood the reason. His deep eyes were extraordinarily wise and confident. Even if Uchiha Madara doesn't use haki, if it wasn't for Akiji, the battle might have ended. It's strange that he can't use armament haki, but in any case, we have a great advantage. Akiji's surprise turned into relief. He never thought that Uchiha Madara wouldn't be able to use haki. This way the odds of winning are much greater. Logia users are the natural enemies of those who can't use haki. As soon as Akiji's voice fell, Uchiha Madara sneered. Arrogant words? A natural enemy of mine? So what if you don't use haki? Do you think I can't do anything to you too? His body full of black iron rods was oppressive and terrifying. In the dark, Uchiha Madara seemed to be emitting black gas behind him. Combined with the strange eyes, he was like a death god coming out of the underworld. It's actually very simple to deal with Logia. You don't necessarily need armament haki, other abilities will do. His hands quickly printed, and Uchiha Madara's mouth curved. If you dare to use the elements, you can try it. This guy is really arrogant. With a snort, Akiji's eyes flashed with a cold light. At the same time, Uchiha Madara's handprint was completed, and an endless sea of fire spewed out of his mouth. Fire style, Grand Fire Annihilation. Scorching hot flames that almost covered the entire sky came rushing over in a grandiose manner. This unprecedented scale covered the sky and covered the earth. Even the sky was dyed a deep red, and the scene was extremely spectacular. Kizaru calmly elementalized and so did Akiji. However, in the next second, Akiji ended his elemental transformation and revealed his original body. His old face was tense and looked a little depressed. What's wrong? You don't dare to elementalize. Uchiha Madara teased. Akiji's expression was within his expectations. Kizaru narrowed his eyes and looked at the melted water droplets under Akiji's feet. He then looked at the hot environment around him. Kazan's body is melting. His attributes are restrained. Kizaru Janwei said as he recalled the black sphere. Sometimes, the suppression of one's celestial attribute was even more terrifying than domineering. Akiji's old face was gloomy. Fortunately, he reacted in time and ended his elemental transformation. Otherwise, his body that had turned into ice would have been directly evaporated by the monstrous fire. Iseon. He leaped up and shot out long and narrow icicles from his arms. Kakaka. Countless ice dregs extended from the ground, and the earth was instantly frozen. Immediately, it rose violently and turned into an iceberg of more than 10 meters, trying to block the fire. Fire can restrain water, but water can also restrain fire, and even has an advantage. Tomb of Samsara, border prison. His eyes were filled with ripples, and then in Madara's sight, several shadows flew out quickly. Each of them had infinite power and looked no different from Uchiha Madara. Kakaka. The majestic ice mountain was instantly smashed by the shadows, and the sea of fire swept out and swallowed Akiji in an instant. The boundless sea of flames swept down with monstrous momentum. Everywhere it passed, it was a complete mess. The ground was roasted to an unbearable state. Hideous cracks appeared on the ground, and the earth was slowly cracking apart. This armament hockey is really a headache. Uchiha Madara sighed helplessly. Nonsense, even if you feel a headache, at least show some embarrassment. Your acting is really bad. Admiral Kizaru took a cigarette and said sarcastically. In the sea of fire, Akiji stood tall and straight like a mountain. However, this Akiji was not that Akiji. His whole body was as black as ink and even deeper than ink, shining in the sea of fire. Madara's eyes passed through the thick sea of fire, and Akiji, who was in the state of armament hockey, came into view. Every inch of his skin turned into hard steel, resisting the erosion of the flame. Dustless, who was controlling Madara and Mariehua, was calm and felt that this scene was very normal. Armament hockey is a universal skill in this world. Virgo, as a vice admiral of the Marine, can be fully armed. There is no reason why Akiji, as an admiral, can't do this. Moreover, he was better than Virgo in every aspect. This feeling is really uncomfortable. Looking around at the blazing sea of fire, even because the fire was too fierce, it burned on Akiji's whole body, and the hot temperature was enough to evaporate everything. Akiji, who was in armament hockey, looked cold. As long as he was elementalized, he was afraid that he would be annihilated on the spot. Akiji's heart was filled with unspeakable grievances. Being forced to such a point by a person who could not use armament hockey, Akiji felt bad luck and helplessness, and at the same time, there was fire in his heart. Chapter 7:11. Water and fire were naturally two opposite attributes. The moment the fire appeared, Akiji felt uncomfortable all over, as if he was going to be melted. His body kept sweating. Water can restrain fire and fire can restrain fire. In the end, who can restrain who and who is better depends on the level of strength. You seem to have forgotten the existence of this old man. Kizaru's calf condensed a powerful flash, and the dazzling light could burn human eyes, making people not dare to look directly at it and instinctively close their eyes. Lightspeed kick. With Kizaru's voice fell, a straight ray of light shot out, cutting through the void, and in the blink of an eye, Uchiha Madara was swallowed. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara still held his hands in front of him and didn't hide. His purple pupils splashed with ripples, and his shadow immediately responded. Boom boom boom, a harsh explosion sounded out of thin air, and the earth trembled, followed by a huge fireball rising into the air, and the blazing impact spread out. On the ground where Uchiha Madara stood, a clear scorched black hole came into view. Even if you don't die, you'll lose a layer of skin, Kizaru said calmly while blowing smoke rings. The power of Lightspeed Kick is amazing, and it can even destroy a mountain and tear a huge crack in the solid earth. The consequences can be imagined if a human body withstands it. Is that so? Then you're doomed to be disappointed. In the black smoke of burning flames, a figure loomed, and the burning flames around him tried to swallow him, but they were crushed like candles in the wind. In the flames, Uchiha Madara was cold, and every time he took a step, the burning flames would gradually extinguish and collapse. Boom! With the last footstep falling, Uchiha Madara stepped out of the flames intact. This guy, impossible, I just hit him head-on. Kizaru frowned and said with a tone of disbelief. The mystery of Tomb of Reincarnation, border prison, is mysterious and you ordinary people will never understand it. Uchiha Madara's face remained cold as he said indifferently. Is it possible that my kick missed? Impossible. Looking at the intact Uchiha Madara, Kizaru's face was strange. At this time Akiji, who was in the state of armament hockey, also came to Kizaru. I don't think so. Something seemed to have blocked the attack for him. Akiji guessed. He had been observing Uchiha Madara's movements. The moment he was attacked, the flash exploded in advance, and it didn't hurt Uchiha Madara's body. You guys are quite smart. Tendo Uchiha Madara couldn't help but look at Akiji with admiration. One was probing the enemy from the front, while the other was secretly observing the enemy's every move. Their coordination was flawless. These two guys are good. It seems that in the past few decades the strength of the three admirals, has progressed rapidly. Dustless, who was far away in Mariehua controlling Tendo Uchiha Madara, sighed. The Admiral's combat experience is extremely rich. Akiji and Kizaru joined the Marine when they were 20 years old. Now the youngest of them, Akiji, is nearly 50 years old. They have been fighting pirates for 30 years. 30 years of rich experience as well as combat experience is not a joke, especially when it comes to devil fruit ability users. Some ability users have never heard of or seen before. Therefore, the Admiral's adaptability is extremely strong. Although they are extremely surprised by Uchiha Madara's ability, they still remain calm and calm. It seems that it's time to retreat. There's no need to entangle with the two of them. The mission is completed. Dustless pondered. His trip was just to stop Kizaru from capturing Robin. Now that their battleship has sunk, it means that there is no means of transportation. When they arrive at Alabasta, maybe Robin will have joined the Straw Hat Pirates and left. Want to go? If I let you go so openly, how will I explain it to Fleet Admiral Sengoku? Kizaru's eyes reflected a cold light, and he immediately waved his hand with great momentum. Like a sculpture of a pacifist, he moved side by side to block Uchiha Madara. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. No one can stop me if I want to go. Not to mention the two of you, even if the Marine's top battle powers gather together, they won't be able to do it. The void vibrated, ripples visible to the naked eye, and a strong repulsive force expanded. Uchiha Madara mobilized a large amount of chakra, and there was even a little blood in his eyes. The whole person was particularly terrifying. This state was no different from an erupting volcano, full of indescribable danger. Super Shinra Tensei. The whole island trembled violently, and the high-density chakra in the body erupted. The impact was as vast as the ocean, and the earth under Uchiha Madara's feet was directly wiped out. Akiji and Kizaru were fine. Both of them were extraordinary, and their observation haki and armament haki were unparalleled. Although they were affected, they escaped the fatal surprise attack. However, the pacifist was not so lucky. Ka. The pacifist's body suddenly cracked under the impact. Even if their skin was as hard as iron, it was difficult to guarantee that they would survive. Their bodies were torn apart by the boundless force, revealing various mechanical parts. That Vegapunk is worthy of being a peerless genius. Uchiha Madara's eyes narrowed, and his anger converged. Although the modified Pacifista's stats weren't as good as the original Bartholomew Bear in all aspects, its body's hardness had increased by quite a bit. The special materials used to construct the Pacifista were obviously not ordinary. Chapter 7:12. As far as the eye could see, the entire central area of the island had suffered an unprecedented impact. The earth had been flattened. The island had suffered a direct impact from the Super Shinra Tensei. The devastated island was a shocking sight, and the giant craters were obvious. This extremely large area of effect attack left everyone dumbfounded. Not only that, the exaggerated destructive power was unforgettable. The entire terrain of the island was rewritten by this unprecedented attack. Kazan. Are you sure the opponent we are fighting is really human? Kizaru's face was covered with dust. At this moment he looked like an old man who hadn't taken a bath for many years. This should be maybe? Not only Kizaru but even Akiji had doubts. The answer sounded ambiguous. Such a large-scale attack was beyond imagination, and the two of them were fortunate enough to follow Garp and Senshi Sengoku to fight against the legendary pirate king Earl D. Roger. Roger, who was almost deified by the world, may not be able to make such a shocking attack. One move almost destroyed the entire island. Anyway, it is necessary to investigate the origin of this guy, otherwise we can't complete the task. Kizaru flicked the dust and lit a cigarette. Hearing this, Kazan nodded in agreement and stared at Tendo Uchiha Madara, who was covered with black tubes with a frozen face. Let's go together. The moment Kizaru's voice fell, he disappeared. Looking at the fragments of the Kazuchiha Madara crushed like ants, his old eyes flashed with disapproval. These simple machines can be mass-produced as many as you want. Yasukani no Magatama. Knowing the strength of Uchiha Madara, Kizaru chose to be cautious. He waved his hand and used his most powerful move. Dark blue light erupted. Unlike the golden giant Dustless's body, a blue skeleton rose from the ground and defended Uchiha Madara. Kensusunu. With Uchiha Madara's low voice, the dark blue light turned into a real one. Clang. 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 Kensusunu was swallowed in the blink of an eye. Because the light was too strong, it covered the dark blue luster of Kinsusanu and dyed it golden. Ka ka ka. In the swallowed Kinsusanu, the sound of bones cracking could be faintly heard. It seems that you are not invincible. Like I said, God is fair to everyone. Kizaru said calmly as he tasted the rich tobacco in his mouth. Following his gaze, the dark blue skeleton gradually collapsed. Let me give him a boost. Qingji revealed a stern expression. Both of his eyes were as sharp as a blade. Icy cold air gathered on his right arm and quickly formed a large exquisite ice sculpture. Ice, stormy pheasant beak. A huge ice bird condensed in an instant, flapping its wings vigorously, sending out a piercing cold wind, and with a powerful impact, it swept towards Uchiha Madara. The cold and gloomy air emanating from his body could freeze time and space. Ka ka ka. At the same time, the impenetrable Susanoo that protected Uchiha Madara finally couldn't withstand the erosion of the light, and it shattered with a bang. Whoosh! The cold wind blew. The cooperation between Kizaru and Akiji was quite close. At the moment when Kinsusanu collapsed, the ice bird condensed by Akiji roared and instantly froze Uchiha Madara into a shining ice sculpture. Under the illumination of the sun, it was extraordinarily beautiful and full of artistic feeling. This monster is finally locked in a cage. His tight heart relaxed and Akiji breathed a sigh of relief. His slightly tired old face also regained its luster. What an unexpected disaster. I was forced into such a mess by a guy with no bounty. Really, how come there are more and more monsters in this world? Looking at himself, Kizaru couldn't help but complain. Looking up, there were many scorched holes in Kizaru's clothes, all thanks to Uchiha Madara. Contact the fleet admiral, the battleship has been completely destroyed by him, we can only send someone to pick up. Ka ka ka. Akiji's voice didn't fall, and the ice that froze Uchiha Madara made a crisp roar, and many cracks could be clearly seen on the surface of the ice. Could it be that this guy is still moving? Akiji's eyes were filled with cold light, and he didn't hesitate to touch the ground with his hands, and the whole earth was instantly swallowed by the ice. Sage. The more piercing ice swallowed Uchiha Madara, and the broken ice all over his body healed and solidified again. Compared to the previous ice bird, this ice age was undoubtedly more terrifying. He has such a strange ability. Maybe it's really like what you said. I don't know when an all-rounder like him will appear. Thinking of Uchiha Madara's dazzling ability, Akiji couldn't believe it. All-rounder? So what? In front of justice, even if he's invincible, he has to stretch his neck and accept the punishment. Kizaru flicked the ash off his cigarette and said lightly, I say, are you two mistaken? Do you think that's the real me? At this moment, a ghostly voice came from behind Kizaru and Akiji. What you see may not be true. What you painstakingly deal with is actually just my shadow. Do you think you're winning? Are you Marines so naive? Turning his head, Uchiha Madara with various black tubes all over his body mocked. He touched his chin indifferently, and the sharpness in his eyes converged. Damn it. This tone and this expression, why do I feel so familiar? Kizaru's old face was full of puzzlement, and he seemed to have an impression of Uchiha Madara's speech and behavior. What kind of ability is it? Forget it, for the time being you're an all-rounder. Akiji's doubts were instantly relieved, and he was no longer entangled. After capturing this guy alive, all the puzzles will be solved. Ka ka ka. At the same time, the ice that froze Uchiha Madara also shattered, but there was no one inside. Originally, I had wanted to simply leave. However, it would appear that if I don't teach you two brats a lesson, you two won't let me leave unscathed. Tendo Uchiha Madara's voice became indifferent, and at the end of his words he disappeared. So fast. Seeing Tendo Uchiha Madara disappear in an instant, Kizaru and Kuzan immediately used their observation haki to perceive Tendo Uchiha Madara. Tsk. Let me see how much you, three great generals, have grown. Dustless Mariewa's face was full of playfulness, and he suddenly found that his boring life was a lot happier, and then he seriously controlled Uchiha Madara's movements. Unfamiliar the first time, familiar the second time. At first it was still not too familiar. But along with the passage of time, Dustless already became more and more proficient in using heavenly Dao spots. Found it? With a cold light in his eyes, his observation haki captured Uchiha Madara's murderous intent, and the air around his body quickly froze and turned into several sharp spears. Ice, double thorn spear. Aiming in the direction of Uchiha Madara, it immediately whistled out mercilessly. Uchiha Madara's eyes narrowed slightly, and he noticed the ice spears shooting towards him. His sunken eyes rose, his hands slightly opened, and a perfect defensive circle suddenly formed. Shinra Tensei. The 360-degree defense was watertight, protecting Uchiha Madara. The space was tightly sealed and even the air was isolated. Bang bang bang. Shinra Tensei was enough to defend against most physical attacks, and the ice spears were easily bounced off and penetrated deep into the soil. The sharp spears were hard to imagine, and they directly cut the ground. A normal human would have been sliced in half with just a light slash. Laser. A large number of photons condensed at the tip of his thumb, and the shining light made people unable to open their eyes, and immediately rushed out, swallowing Uchiha Madara. Seeing this, Tendo Uchiha Madara just didn't care about it. The void in front of him slowly distorted, showing a strange vortex shape. Kamui. The powerful roar fell, and the vortex-shaped space turned into a bottomless black hole, easily swallowing the gorgeous light beam. Seeing this, Kizaru suddenly froze, and immediately realized that Uchiha Madara was approaching. He was about to elementalize, but suddenly remembered the terrible gravity before, and immediately cancelled the plan. His right arm glowed with golden light, and a sharp sword condensed in an instant. Clang! The empty space suddenly had a spark, and immediately saw two figures flashing out of thin air. Uchiha Madara, holding a black iron stick in his hand, easily blocked Kizaru's attack. Don't forget me. Akiji attacked from behind, holding an ice sword in his hand, and used all his strength to stab Uchiha Madara's head. You are too careless. I never said that I would fight alone. Seeing this, Uchiha Madara turned his head to look at Akiji, and the corner of his mouth swept with a gloomy smile. His eyes rippled and a very dangerous wave quietly spread. At this moment time seemed to stop. Wheel grave, border prison. Akiji's expression suddenly solidified, and the hair on his body stood up uncontrollably. He remembered Uchiha Madara's strange trick before, and his face was full of determination. Instinctively he smelled ominous and dangerous. Busashoku hardening. In an instant his whole body turned into black steel, strengthening his own defense. Boom! When the sharp ice spear was about to pierce Uchiha Madara, Akiji's right face was hit by a strong attack, and his whole body flew upside down and hit the ground heavily. And you? His eyes then turned to Kizaru, and his pupils once again swayed with a dangerous light. Boom! With Akiji as an example, although Kizaru had been carefully prepared, he still couldn't avoid the same fate. His abdomen was hit hard and he was hit by a powerful force. Akiji and Kizaru couldn't see it, but in Uchiha Madara's sight, there were as many as 5 shadows protecting him. Damn bastard, you don't know how to respect the old. Kizaru stood up awkwardly, and his heart was extremely sullen. It's not that he didn't want to elementalize, but Uchiha Madara's method of suppressing his attributes was too terrible. Thinking of the previous experience, Kizaru's scalp was numb. Once controlled by the ghost called Chibaku Tensei, he was afraid that he would live in a meteorite for the rest of his life. Akiji's old face was also ugly. He didn't dare to elementalize easily. If he was caught, he would be directly evaporated by Uchiha Madara's hot flame. Therefore, Kizaru and Akiji could only rely on Busashoku Haki to resist. Although they would be attacked, the risk was much smaller. One wrong step and they may fall. Now you should know what you and I are aware of. Uchiha Madara glanced at the two and whispered. Kizaru and Akiji looked at each other and still refused to give up. There was no other reason except that the admirals who died in battle had never been heard of escaping from pirates. Otherwise, they would have no face to return to the marine headquarters. This unequal war didn't end until late at night. Uchiha Madara still left safe and sound. Akiji and Kizaru couldn't stop him at all and could only watch. Dustless naturally wouldn't waste time with Kizaru and Akiji, because this was originally to stop Kizaru from capturing Robin. Destroying their battleship was actually the end of the matter. However, Kizaru and Akiji refused to let go, so he could only fight. I guess there will be a bounty tomorrow, staring at the sea in the distance, Dustless said calmly. His performance was unusually indifferent, which was inevitable. Chapter 7:13. The bounty on a pirate is not only based on his own strength, but also an estimate of his future potential. Making the most comprehensive analysis, if the pirate is too dangerous, the marine may immediately destroy their high-end combat power. However, as for Uchiha Madara, it is estimated that no one can destroy him. Time passed unknowingly, and 2 days passed in a blink of an eye. On the magnificent sea, huge ripples appeared. Looking as far as the eye could see, several giant battleships slowly moved forward. This time the Marine Fleet Admiral Sengoku and the Marine Hero Garp took the lead. Can Kazan and Borsellino be trusted, Garp? Thinking of the absurd rescue message 2 days ago, Sengoku still had deep doubts. In fact, I also think it's ridiculous. They are 2 admirals. Even if they are not opponents, they shouldn't be beaten to the point where they are about to starve to death. Garp said incredulously. They are admirals and they won't starve to death. Who knows? Anyway, we are almost there. Sengoku shook his head and smiled bitterly. He was leading the team in case of accidents, and even his old comrade Garp was involved. He was afraid that this was a trap against the Marine. Uchiha Madara? When did such a guy appear in the world? This is a sign of the coming chaos. Sengoku looked at the distant sea, and his mood was particularly complicated. Powerful enemies always stand on the opposite side of the Marine. 2 days ago, Kizaru Akiji and Uchiha Madara fought on the island. This island was extremely desolate, and there were abandoned rocks everywhere. Not to mention suitable prey, even flowers and trees were rare. The Marines' battleships were all sunk, and the food and water on board as well as daily necessities, all sank to the bottom of the sea, so Kizaru Akiji and others were hungry for 2 days. There was no food on this desolate island, and the surrounding sea was extremely strange. Even fish were rare, so they could only endure 2 days of hunger. It's all because of that guy. He made me so embarrassed, hateful. On the reef, Kizaru looked decadent, and he cursed Uchiha Madara listlessly. At this moment, Kizaru was unbearable to look at. His clothes were ragged and there were burnt holes everywhere. His lips were all cracked and his eyes were sunken. Akiji beside him was not much better. He simply lay on the ground and took a nap. From his tired look, it was not difficult to see that Akiji was also very sad. It's reasonable to say that with an admiral's physique, even if they don't eat for a few days, it wouldn't be a big deal, but after fighting with Uchiha Madara for almost a day, both of them have already exhausted their physical strength. It's useless to complain. If we want to capture that man, at least the 3 of us have to go together. Akiji suddenly opened his eyes. His turbid eyes were full of tiredness, like an old man in his twilight years. His empty stomach was growling uncontrollably. The 3 of us? You mean to add Sakazuki? Kizaru was surprised as the scattered sunlight regained its brilliance. The 3 Marine admirals teamed up to deal with one person at the same time, even the current Whitebeard couldn't withstand it. Aren't you overestimating that guy? Kizaru frowned, expressing deep doubts about this. Hearing this, Akiji glanced at Kizaru, then stood up and looked at the spectacular sea in the distance. His voice was filled with endless sadness. The era in front of us is more chaotic than the era of the Pirate King. Akiji's face was complex as he said to himself with emotion. Countless pirates are fighting for hegemony, but there is only one position of the Pirate King. It's not difficult to see how bloody the sea will be in the future. Do you think that we have a chance of winning against that man named Uchiha Madara? Akiji turned his head and looked at Kizaru meaningfully. Hearing this, Kizaru was silent and after a long time he shook his head. After almost a day of confrontation, he and Akiji were suppressed. Uchiha Madara's performance was more like a test of the bottom line of Kizaru and Akiji's strength. Looking at the miserable island, Kizaru couldn't help but feel numb and cold sweat as he thought of Uchiha Madara's strength. Rumble? At this moment, Kizaru's stomach was also rumbling, and his old face was suddenly very embarrassed. At the same time, his heart was filled with strange emotions. The experience of these days was the biggest shame of his life. The 2 dignified admirals were forced to be so unbearable and hungry. Kizaru couldn't help but feel angry when he thought about it. Akiji didn't care about this. Perhaps the 3 of us together may not be the opponent of Uchiha Madara. He is too terrifying, and his strength has reached a point where we can only look up to him. Akiji said with fear. Ship. It seems to be a marine ship. The fleet admiral is finally here. Suddenly, Kizaru found a black dot in the distant sea, and the frustration on his face disappeared. Akiji nodded and looked at it. It was indeed a marine battleship. This time we lost face. As the highest battle power of the marine, we actually let the fleet admiral and Garp personally come to rescue us. Am I dreaming now? Kizaru said with a smile on his face. Akiji nodded undeniably. He also felt the same way. Sometimes he thought that this was a dream, but it was just a joke played by God. However, the flattened island, the crushed mountain, and the island where all the creatures were killed, obviously told Kizaru and Akiji that this was a cruel fact. Chapter 7:14. About half an hour later, the Marine's battleship finally docked on the shore. Fleet Admiral Sengoku and Vice Admiral Garp stepped onto the island and looked at the flattened island. Both of them looked at each other with astonishment. This attack seems to cover the whole island. After a moment of sluggishness, Sengoku, who recovered from his shock, said with a shocked face. It's not that he hasn't seen a large-scale attack, Kizaru belongs to that kind of attack, but it's the first time in his life to see such an exaggerated attack that flattened the whole island. Garp also nodded in amazement, his eyes were wide open and full of horror. He has fought with countless pirates, but he has never met anyone who can do such an exaggerated thing and change the geological structure of the entire island. Sorry, Fleet Admiral, we failed our mission. At this moment, Kuzan and Kizaru came side by side, with guilt on their faces. Their old faces were full of exhaustion, as if their souls had been taken away. Their eyes were dull and turbid. Seeing this scene, Sengoku took back the words he was about to say, and then waved his hand with great momentum, indicating that the two should go to the ship and rest for a while. From the wounds on Kizaru and Akiji's body, it's not difficult to see that they have experienced an unprecedented battle before. This world, there's another great person, Sengoku sighed. His complex tone was filled with endless sadness. Looking at the island that was almost dismembered, not to mention Kizaru and Akiji, even he had a feeling of soul trembling. Sengoku knew that the root cause of the failure of this mission was not Kizaru and Akiji. Sengoku, are you going to return empty-handed? Garp was surprised to hear the loss in Sengoku's tone. The Marine Fleet Admiral has always been the master of the hawk without seeing the rabbit. Asking him to give up the prey and return empty-handed is worse than killing him. The Uchiha Madara that Kizaru and Akiji talked about? Sengoku asked. Garp shook his head and said, I'm talking about that devil's child, Nico Robin. Aren't you going after her? Sengoku's old face suddenly collapsed and his tone was bad. If I knew the loss was so heavy, I wouldn't have taken Nico Robin. After that, Sengoku boarded the ship angrily. Garp's old face grinned as he looked at the fragments of the pacifists all over the place. He sighed and followed Sengoku's footsteps to board the battleship again. No wonder Sengoku was so angry. The two generals were beaten like rabbits. Even the newly developed humanoid weapon was crushed like an ant. It would be strange if he was happy. Time flew by and 7 days of effort quietly slipped through his fingers. The latest bounty list flowed out of the Marine headquarters and spread all over the world. Most of the names on the list were emerging pirates from all over the world, including Straw Hat Luffy. In just a few hours, the news had spread to every corner of the world. He thought it was just a sparse and ordinary bounty list issued by the Marine headquarters, but a strange bounty image soon plunged the whole world into a storm. The man in the painting was tall and big, and there were all kinds of black iron rods on his body. His cold eyes looked down at the sky, and his awe-inspiring gaze looked down at everything in the world. The first impression he gave was that he was arrogant. The most surprising thing was that his bounty was as high as 500 million berries. It was as if a heavy stone had fallen into the water, setting off huge ripples. The whole world was boiling and in chaos. Pirates all over the world were talking crazily as if they had been injected with chicken blood. It's not that there are no pirates with a bounty of 500 million berries. On the contrary, there are many pirates in the second half of the Grand Line. But the man named Uchiha Madara in front of him was obviously a newcomer. His first bounty was as high as 500 million berries. Looking at the history of pirates in the past decades or even longer, it has never happened. The shock to the whole world can be imagined. A newcomer like the sea has a bounty of 500 million berries. This sky-high bounty made many veteran pirates feel ashamed, and they shouted that they want to take a look at this kid who has just entered the Dao. All in all, Uchiha Madara's name instantly became the object of discussion among pirates all over the world. Oh, Sengoku, that old man. Dustless of Mariehua naturally also received the information. Looking at the list of bounties of 500 million berries in his hand, he instantly understood the intentions of Sengoku. With the strength of Tendo Uchiha Madara, 500 million berries is indeed low. It should be 1 billion berries or even 1.5 billion berries. White Zetsu was also puzzled by this bounty. Uchiha Madara's strength is definitely more than 500 million berries. He can easily defeat 2 Marine admirals. At the very least, the conservative starting point is 700 million berries or 800 million berries. Now the bounty of only 500 million berries is really not justified. Master, this bounty is unprecedented. From the establishment of the world government to the present, for more than 800 years, no one has reached the bounty of 500 million berries for the first time. Hancock didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For the first time, don't mention 500 million berries, even 100 million berries is rare. Dustless and White Zetsu actually think that the bounty is too low. Hancock's helplessness can be imagined. I'm not talking about the bounty. Sengoku actually has a deeper meaning. Things like berries are just a concept for me. The fame and fortune of a pirate is just a fleeting cloud. Dustless replied with a deep look. Berries and reputation are trivial things. What he cares about is Sengoku's sinister plan. Chapter 7:15. All in all, the news of Uchiha Madara's bounty of 500 million berries swept the world in an instant like a hurricane, and all the pirates in the sea were shocked. A storm unique to Uchiha Madara swept the planet. Even the Whitebeard pirates, who recently went berserk because of the disappearance of Fire Fist Ace, who was actually kidnapped by Dustless, stopped moving for a while and became strangely silent. They were also confused by the bounty of 500 million berries. A newcomer with a bounty of 500 million berries, this is the first time since the records of the world-famous pirates have been recorded. The name of Uchiha Madara remains in everyone's heart, and from then on, his every move will inevitably affect the nerves of the world, and it is extremely difficult to ignore him. However, everything has two sides. There is a saying that the higher you stand, the harder you fall. This is a truth that has not changed since ancient times. The higher you are held, the harder you fall. In fact, it is also a disguised form of flattery. Sengoku's intention is to make Uchiha Madara the object of everyone's jealousy. Pirates pay attention to fame and fortune. Uchiha Madara's sudden rise broke the conventional rules of the One Piece world. He is the first pirate in history with a bounty of 500 million berries. There will be proud veteran pirates who will not accept this, and challengers will naturally come in an endless stream. Killing a newcomer with a bounty of 500 million berries will definitely make him famous. Therefore, the bounty of 500 million berries is just right, and more or less, it may be self-defeating. Today, one of the Jianghu 4 emperors, the captain of the Bigumamu pirates, Charlotte Lingling, her bounty is only 850 million berries. Increasing the bounty of Uchiha Madara to the level of a Jianghu 4 emperors will inevitably arouse suspicion. Sengoku's painstaking calculation is useless. Uchiha Madara is just an enemy of the marine. If the target is a pirate, I will personally deal with it. In this way, Sengoku's plan to kill Madara will be aborted. Dustless originally intended to hide Madara, and only when dealing with the marine will Madara come in handy. By the way, I heard that Kizaru and Akiji are starving to death. Dustless asked with interest. Picking up the photos on the table in his hand, Kizaru and Akiji's hair was messy, their faces were dirty and they looked thin. Obviously they haven't eaten for many days. They looked quite similar to the drug addicts Dustless used to live in the third dimension. There is no doubt that all this is thanks to Uchiha Madara. The Super Shinra Tensei destroyed the entire island in one fell swoop. Only Akiji and Kizaru were struggling. They couldn't even find food to appease their hunger, so naturally they were starving. The Navy should try to cover up this kind of photo. How can it be published in the newspaper? Isn't this hitting their own face? Wuxia wondered. Kizaru and Akiji's embarrassment was also published in the newspaper, becoming the contrast of Uchiha Madara. There's no such thing as an impenetrable wall in this world. Sometimes, the more you want to hide something, the faster it will be exposed. Hee hee. Baizu's face was filled with a wretched expression as he spoke. He even had a gloating smile on his face. Hearing this, Dustless glanced at White Zetsu. If he didn't guess wrong, it should be this kid who exposed the news to the marine. In this regard, Wuxia is too lazy to care about it. This is not a bad thing. Although he is also a marine admiral, the world government and the marine headquarters are not in the same bed as each other. Wuxia is naturally happy to fight the arrogance of the marine. Since the emergence of the three admirals in the past few years, the marine headquarters has been extremely high profile, often taking the initiative to attack the pirates of the New World, and the 7 warlords of the sea colluded with the 7 warlords of the sea. Over the years they have eliminated many vicious pirate groups. Today's New World is barely calm. At least as long as the Jianghu 4 emperors don't make trouble, the sea is relatively peaceful. This sudden incident is the first time that the marine has made a fool of themselves, and the protagonists are 2 admirals. The impact is unprecedented. I think Sengoku is more uncomfortable than eating a fly. In a trance, Dustless seemed to see the angry look of Sengoku and his eyes glowed. There is no doubt that Sengoku didn't expect Uchiha Madara to appear out of thin air. The reason and motive are also inexplicable. It seems that he is just like other pirates, holding the mentality of becoming famous in the world. And the object of suffering is naturally Kizaru and Akiji. What about the movements of the Straw Hat Pirates? They should have landed on Alabasta. Dustless changed the topic to the Straw Hat Pirates. At the same time, the considerate Hancock sent a fragrant afternoon tea for Dustless to enjoy. Suddenly remembering the blue-haired girl Vivi and her father Corbula that Mariewa met back then, Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange luster. It seems that he has been in contact with Crocodile. But Straw Hat Luffy was too weak and was almost killed by Crocodile on the spot. That kid survived and thought of a plan to deal with Crocodile. White Zetsu said with appreciation. Using water to deal with Crocodile, this is the strategy that Luffy came up with for the time being. Although it is very rough, it is unexpectedly effective and very practical. It can deal with Crocodile's elementalization. Kizaru and Akiji have been defeated. It seems that it won't be long before Luffy joins the Straw Hat Pirates as an undercover. It seems that everything is ready. White Zetsu heard this and nodded gently. Chapter 7:16. In the Marine headquarters, in the solemn and sacred conference room, the atmosphere was heavy and the atmosphere was oppressive. It was hundreds of times more difficult to breathe than usual. Looking around, the whole conference room was full of stars, and the three admirals were all in the list, including Dustless, who was also sitting in his seat. Beside him were Garp and Vice Admiral Tsuru. However, unlike the past, Akiji and Kizaru both lowered their heads, like defeated roosters, drooping their heads without the glory of the past. Now because of them, the Marine has become a laughing stock. Sengoku's old face was dark and gloomy. He knew that the reason for the failure of the mission was not Kizaru and Akiji, but it was a fact that they failed the mission. Sengoku was also not tolerant. As the highest general of the fleet admiral, he must be clear about public and private affairs. If he should be punished, he must be fair. Therefore, Kazan and Borsellino were both reprimanded, and their salaries were reduced for several years. There is no need to think about it, these are all for others to see. As an admiral of the Marine, naturally he can't dismiss them. After all, they are the highest combat power of the Marine. Boom! At this moment, a dull roar, accompanied by a blazing heat wave spread out. Looking up, Akainu's magma fist smashed the table in front of him. Crocodile, that bastard. He has violated the original agreement and stood on the opposite side of justice. I suggest that his position as Shichibukai be revoked immediately and send troops to clean him up immediately. There is no impenetrable wall in the world. Perhaps others don't know the purpose of Crocodile, but the high-level Marine officials present know it in their hearts. When Crocodile took in Nico Robin, it happened that Robin's whereabouts were suddenly exposed. Sengoku originally planned to arrest Nico Robin immediately, but he was surprised to find that Crocodile recruited her. This has indirectly touched the bottom line of Sengoku's tolerance. Shichibukai can be lawless, but there is a limit. Without thinking, Sengoku knew what Crocodile was thinking. What if the ancient weapon was taken away by the ambitious Crocodile? That's for sure. He has already violated the taboo, so he must pay the price. Sengoku's tone was extremely hoarse, and his calm eyes flashed with scarlet violence, showing the courage of a Marine Fleet admiral. This is Crocodile's own destruction, and he will not be merciful. Not only that, he had to deal with this ambitious insect immediately. Immediately issue an order to the world to revoke the position of Crocodile's Shichibukai. Sengoku stood up and wrote quickly. He wrote a simple order quickly and handed it to his assistant beside him. Then he looked around. As for the candidate to suppress Crocodile, because of Uchiha Madara, his heart is still in a mess. His strength is unprecedented, and the admiral doesn't seem to be able to deal with it. The righteous sinner shall be, this time I will complete the crusade against Crocodile. Akainu was filled with righteous indignation and was about to take the initiative to accept the task. A light, lazy voice was issued in advance. It was very simple but unquestionable. You are so diligent. It's strange, did the sun come out from the south? Garp looked at Dustless beside him in surprise and said that he looked out of the window to see if the sun came out from the south. Not only Garp, but all the Marine executives looked at Dustless in surprise. He is the most lazy in the Marine. Now he is so diligent, which is really incredible. Dustless glanced at the old guy and immediately looked at Sengoku on the main seat. In that case, the task of suppressing Crocodile will be handed over to you. After a long silence, Sengoku rationally decided. Even if the mysterious Uchiha Madara appears again, Dustless's strength is enough to deal with him. Even if he can't beat him, he should be able to escape. Sengoku, this old guy. Forget it, it's better for me. Crocodile, your task is over and it's over. With a sinister smile, Dustless has sentenced Crocodile to death in his heart. At the beginning he just used him. Now that the purpose has been achieved, the people who should shut up must shut up forever. No matter what, we have to arrest that guy immediately. With a cold light in his eyes, Sengoku's tone was resolute. Being slapped in the face, naturally he has to double back. Revenge has always been the principle of Sengoku. No problem, Dustless smiled confidently. His light laughter was full of casual, as if it was not worth mentioning. He naturally knows why Sengoku is so anxious. The real reason is estimated to be to make an example of Crocodile, the 7 warlords of the sea, to deter pirates. Humph. Looking at Dustless with dissatisfaction, Akainu immediately sat down. Since Dustless chose to take the initiative to attack, there is no role for him. The strength of the two sides is completely different. The giant elephant can easily step on a small mouse. Sengoku nodded. Although he was also very puzzled, he did not ask much. Anyway, the main thing is to catch Crocodile, the mastermind. Catch him? It's better to send him to hell. That eyesore of a fly should have died more than 10 years ago. With a cold mist on his face, Dustless has decided to kill Crocodile directly. He will definitely die. If he is handed over to Sengoku, he may make a boring public execution. Chapter 717. Crocodile painstakingly looked for Pluto to deal with Dustless. For such an ambitious enemy, Dustless used to let him live for more than 10 years. Now that the time has come, he will never tolerate him. I promise to complete the task. Saluting Sengoku, Dustless smiled and promised. When Sengoku saw this scene, he felt strange. He didn't know why, but he always had a strange feeling in his heart. Not only Sengoku, but other marine generals also stared at Dustless. They always felt that his words were insinuating and had other meanings. After a few words of greetings, the hours-long meeting ended. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Although Sengoku asked to arrest Crocodile as soon as possible, it was easier said than done. The journey to Alabasta alone took 7 days. Moreover, due to Wu Chen's deliberate procrastination, he still hadn't left the military headquarters even after 3 consecutive days. Is your justice so sluggish? How dare you? On the seaside of Marin, Dustless leisurely basked in the sun. His personal maid Hancock also followed this time, standing quietly beside Dustless, waiting for orders. A group of marine bosses stood around, staring at Dustless with dissatisfaction. This guy has been basking in the sun for 3 days and even brought his maid. Where did he come to perform a task? Obviously he came to show off his superior life. The hot-tempered Akainu couldn't hold back his temper. Although he had been beaten by Dustless, he couldn't help but ask, "Your justice is too slow. In that case, let me deal with Crocodile." Dustless glanced at him faintly, then took the goblet handed by Hancock and drank the red liquid in the cup. "I'm waiting." Dustless stared deeply into the void in the distance and whispered, "Waiting?" Hearing this, all the Marines were stunned and looked at Dustless. Dustless was too lazy to explain to this group of people. He closed his eyes and leisurely basked in the sun. Luffy and Crocodile were already fighting. He just needed to pick up the ready-made Crocodile. He couldn't run away anyway. In just 3 days after the debut of Uchiha Madara and the 500 million berries bounty on his head, another piece of news that shook the world came out. Crocodile was removed from the title of 7 warlords of the sea. Everywhere in the 4 seas as well as the New World were extremely shocked. The Marines seemed to have been injected with chicken blood in the past 2 days, and all kinds of actions were confusing. Alabasta, the sky was filled with yellow sand. Because of Crocodile's secret interference, the Miracle City, which was originally born in the desert, was filled with wind and sand. It was a scene of doomsday full of desolation. On the city wall, a tall man with a cigar in his mouth, his eyes were deeply sunken, his face was full of vicissitudes, he was wearing a black trench coat, and there was a scar on his face. "President, it seems that our goal has been exposed. It is better to retreat temporarily." Next to Crocodile, a slender young woman suggested. Looking closely, it was Nico Robin, but because Crocodile's back was to her, he didn't see the contempt and disapproval in Robin's eyes. Crocodile was unmoved. Now that he has been exposed and the title of 7 Warlords of the Sea has been exploited, he can't give up the current plan. That man? Her eyes were empty and Dustless's back appeared indifferently in her mind. Robin's eyes were full of unshakable firmness. She secretly said in her heart, "He will be able to bring my mother back to life." Wandering in the outside world for many years, Robin has been performing tasks according to Dustless's instructions more than 10 years ago, and every time she can turn danger into safety. It's like God can predict the future. Thinking of Dustless's incredible prediction ability, which was almost 100% accurate, Robin's heart was beating uncontrollably with a thump-thump-thump sound. Her breasts were also undulating. If you can predict the future, then it must not be difficult to bring the dead back to life. Her eyes were full of fanatical flames. At this moment, Robin's temperament was particularly hot. Even Crocodile was affected. He suddenly turned around and looked at Robin in surprise. "What's wrong?" Hearing this, Robin was stunned and then instantly restored her former calmness. "I think it won't take long for my dream to come true, so I'm happy." "Yes." Crocodile's eyes also glowed from blankness, looking at the distant sky with strong confidence. It's just that he didn't catch the fleeting sarcasm in Robin's eyes. In the dark, Crocodile seems to have dreamed of controlling ancient weapons and sweeping the world. Of course, there is also Dustless's appearance of fleeing. Rubber pistol. At this moment, with a loud shout, a fist rose from the ground, extended without limit, and smashed directly from the bottom of the tower. "That kid is not dead yet, forget it, it's not too late to kill you this time." Crocodile looked down at Luffy and others under the tower with a contemptuous smile at the corner of his mouth. Looking at the incoming fist, he was even more disdainful. "I can elementalize. How can this kind of casual attack be possible?" The arrogant laughter didn't stop and Crocodile was ruthlessly smashed. Looking closely, Luffy's rubber fist was dripping with water. Chapter 718. Robin looked at Crocodile with pity, and her beautiful eyes were somewhat sympathetic. This idiot seems to think that only armament hockey can subdue him. Crocodile, who was caught off guard by Luffy, fell to the ground like a meteorite, splashing a lot of dust. Because he didn't react in time, his face was covered with dust. "Bastard, a half-baked person who can't use armament hockey can touch my body? Is this water?" His face suddenly solidified and he touched the water stains left on his wound. Crocodile was stunned and his mind was blank for a while. Such a strange situation is the first time he has encountered it. "President, be careful of that rubber kid." Seeing that Crocodile didn't wake up, Robin roared with an anxious expression, and even because she was too excited, her tone was filled with unprecedented sharpness. Boom. Despite the first reaction, Crocodile's face was hit head-on and his body flew out. With a loud bang, the ancient city wall suddenly collapsed and burst. "That's all?" On the surface, Robin pretended to be worried, but in her heart, she disagreed. Although this Crocodile is a top force like the Shichibukai, his vision is completely different from the young master's. He is like a rag picker. Spitting out her tongue, Robin's heart was merciless. Sometimes in order to cooperate with Crocodile, she has to work hard to be ignorant and obey Crocodile. Her inner entanglement can be imagined. Robin had once followed Dustless for a period of time. She was the complete opposite of the ignorant Dustless she used to be. Her knowledge of all aspects was extremely comprehensive, and she was even more familiar with the weaknesses of nature ability users. In addition to armament hockey, the weakness of the attribute is enough to deal with. Luffy used this as a basis to find Crocodile's weakness. Looks like it's just as young master said. This seemingly careless brat actually has a wise side to him. Above the tall building, overlooking the confrontation between Crocodile and Luffy below, Robin's beautiful face showed appreciation, and she was quite surprised by Luffy's wit. At the same time, the scuffle between Crocodile's subordinates and the Straw Hat Pirates under the city wall also began. After a short thought, Robin was about to help Crocodile. After all, she was still Crocodile's subordinate and couldn't turn a blind eye. Ka. Suddenly the ground beneath his feet cracked. White Zetsu broke out of the ground. He looked at Robin, indicating that he should not act rashly. "Young master, do you have any orders?" Robin asked calmly. His eyes were as calm as water. Apparently she was already used to this scene. Over the years, her communication with Dustless was almost always through White Jew. Just pretend and then wait for Straw Hat Luffy to defeat him. White Zetsu glanced at Crocodile, who was suppressing Luffy, and said calmly. Dustless's order was like this. Let Dustless defeat Crocodile. After the matter was over, Dustless would come over in a marine battleship and kill Crocodile, which was equivalent to completing the task. Luffy? You mean the boy with the straw hat? Hearing this, Robin's eyes flashed with surprise, and immediately her delicate face surged with disapproval. She said bluntly, I don't think that Straw Hat Kid is Crocodile's opponent. He is one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Even if he is worthless, he is the strongest of the strong. It is impossible for him to win against Crocodile with a bounty of 30 million berries. Robin made a serious analysis. Whether it was the situation on the scene, past records, or combat experience, Crocodile was better than Straw Hat Luffy. All in all, this was an unequal battle. Is it? But this is what that person means. White Zetsu did not hesitate to kick the ball to Dustless. Young master. Robin's body froze when he heard that. His gaze towards Crocodile changed immediately. His eyes were filled with pity. It was obvious that he was looking at a prisoner. This woman's change is too fast. I just mentioned Dustless-sama and she immediately jumped ship. White Zetsu was speechless. Originally, Nico Robin was optimistic about Crocodile, but after White Zetsu said that, she immediately joined Luffy's camp. Her position was too weak. Although I don't know why the young master is so optimistic about Straw Hat. But in the past 10 years, the young master's predictions have never been wrong, so it should be true. She put down the straw hat, and her eyes were full of firmness. In short, just let nature take its course. When Luffy defeats Crocodile, you can use the Den Den Mushi to notify me. His voice fell, and without waiting for Nico Robin to make any response, White Zetsu's body drilled into the ground again, and like a ghost, he disappeared without a trace. Seeing White Zetsu disappearing like a gopher, Robin chose to respect Dustless's will. Now, in her world, the only living person is Dustless, omniscient, omnipotent supreme existence. Sometimes, when she thought of Dustless's incredible prediction ability in the past, Robin would be more excited than ever, like a crazy fanatic. After all, predicting the future is a divine stroke, and Robin's blind worship is pardonable. Chapter 719. Although as an archaeologist she shouldn't judge a thing emotionally, Robin also knows that she should treat it rationally, but sometimes she can't help it. It's like being possessed. Occasionally she feels that something can't be achieved. It's obviously an illusion, but when she thinks of Dustless she feels it's real, and there seems to be some mysterious force driving her. Robin suddenly realized that it was as if she was living for Wuxia right now. Really? No wonder Hancock can't leave the young master. Robin couldn't help but feel speechless. She and Dustless rarely met, but in her mind, Dustless's figure often floated. Hancock and Dustless get along with each other day and night, and this experience is probably more clear and obvious. For Hancock and Robin, Dustless has penetrated into their hearts and left an indelible impression. That is, everything about Hancock and Robin has been deeply rooted in their minds. Just like Hancock as a maid, the essence of her existence is to serve Dustless, and so is Nico Robin. Time flew by, and when they realized it, it was already 10 days later. On the blue sea, huge waves swallowed the surrounding sea at an extremely fast speed, rolling up even bigger waves. Battleships with the Navy flag cut through the thistles and thorns and sailed rapidly on the sea. And the destination was Alabasta. Crocodile escaped. The Marines there are useless, but this is just right. On the spacious deck, Dustless sat leisurely in a chair, looking comfortable with his legs crossed and shaking his right foot from time to time. His expression was full of laziness and enjoyment. Hancock beside him was peeling grapes seriously, and the person talking to Dustless was Nico Robin in Alabasta. The content is very simple. 9 days ago, as Dustless had predicted before, Luffy, who was in a small universe, successfully defeated Sand Crocodile. Including his subordinates, they were all defeated by the Straw Hat Pirates. And because the previous fleet admiral deprived him of the title of Shichibukai, the defeated Crocodile has been handed over to the local marine by the Alabasta royal family. However, perhaps because God took care of Crocodile just yesterday, the insidious and cunning Crocodile escaped. This time, Crocodile didn't rescue his former subordinates, and only Robin followed Crocodile to the end of the world. Because of Robin's obedience to Dustless, she was not caught by the Straw Hat Pirates. She had been secretly watching the situation. When Crocodile jumped out, Robin continued to follow him, or it could be said that she was monitoring him in disguise. Sometimes some smart guys always do stupid things that make people laugh. That guy. He gave up the opportunity to step into heaven, instead he stepped into hell. Stupid. Nico Robin on the opposite side of the den Mushy frowned slightly. She couldn't understand Dustless's words because Crocodile had escaped. Because of my delay. Sengoku has sent Kazan to meet Crocodile in advance. If he can be caught with Kazan's character, he will definitely be locked and impelled down to save his life. It's a pity that Crocodile escaped. If he killed him, it would be his own fault. Dustless explained sarcastically. Some people always think that they like to be self-righteous, but in the end they lose their lives in vain. Crocodile is like this now. It's better for him to be caught peacefully. Now that he has escaped, Dustless can just find an opportunity to kill him. Keep an eye on Crocodile. In about 2 or 3 hours I will arrive at Alabasta. Looking up, staring at the sea fog in front of him, the outline of the city could be vaguely seen. Dustless whispered, and at the same time, his eyes were shining with a cold light. If Crocodile makes an unwise move, some of his unexpected moves, you will kill him instead of me, Robin. Dustless is still on his way to Alabasta, and compared with the diligent Akiji he is too far behind. At this moment, Akiji is probably in the palace of Alabasta, drinking afternoon tea with King Corbula. No problem, master. Robin in front of the den Mushy vowed with a charming smile on her face. After following Dustless for a while, her strength is definitely not worse than Crocodile. Even in some aspects, after Dustless's guidance, she is better than Crocodile. Even if her combat power is not as good as an admiral of the marine, it is enough to deal with people like Crocodile, not to mention that he is now a stray dog. Be careful. This time, Kazan secretly lurked in Alabasta. It should be secretly arranged by Sengoku. If it wasn't for White Setsu's clone accidentally meeting him, I would have been kept in the dark. Dustless said. He is naturally not afraid of Akiji, but Robin is different. Immediately they chatted casually. Dustless hung up the den Mushy, put the peeled grapes in his mouth, and sat on the couch to cultivate. Sengoku is really despicable. Dustless muttered to himself while looking at the void in the distance. The task is unpredictable. Maybe Uchiha Madara will come back to attack. Therefore, Sengoku arranged for Dustless to go to Alabasta, and Akiji secretly lurked. It is estimated that he wants to use Dustless to attract Uchiha Madara's attention. Unfortunately, he didn't know that Uchiha Madara was just a clone controlled by Dustless. Chapter 720. Time passed quickly and half a day passed in a blink of an eye. Alabasta used to be an oasis in the desert with charming scenery, and Cobra was also a rare king with a conscience, and the whole country showed a prosperous state of development. However, as it was targeted by Crocodile, it gradually declined and then collapsed. This group of guys, really, if the sky falls down, the tall will hold it up. The wind was blowing and the cold wind was sweeping, mixed with dense sand, and suddenly a sigh of frustration, full of helplessness and unprecedented headache, seemed to be quite annoyed and depressed. Looking closely, there were a considerable number of Marines stationed here, and the person who made the sigh was Admiral Akiji. Admiral Kazan, Crocodile is a pirate, and the direction of his escape is estimated to be the sea. Why don't we inform the Marine fleet in advance to catch him? A military officer carefully suggested, as he didn't keep an eye on Crocodile, and the kid escaped. Hearing this, Akiji turned his head and looked at the military officer. His eyes flashed with disapproval, and then he shook his head decisively. Crocodile was a veteran pirate. It was impossible for him to make such a common-sense mistake, and almost all of his subordinates were caught, and the probability of him leaving by ship was temporarily zero. These fools really can't be counted on. Looking around, Kazan couldn't help but sigh. These people live on land all year round. To some extent, they are more like the army, and they are not skilled in fighting on the sea. Looking carefully, Akiji's face was haggard, and his eyes were abnormally cloudy, giving people the feeling of a candle in the wind. These days were like years for him, and the most unfortunate things in his life seemed to have happened during this time. At first, he was molested by Uchiha Madara, and then Crocodile escaped. What made Akiji speechless was that he wanted to capture the Straw Hat Pirates as an atonement, but the result was that Crocodile escaped. Thinking about it, Kazan felt a stomachache and uncomfortable all over his body, and he sighed in his heart. In the desolate desert, two silhouettes moved forward against the wind. They were exceptionally lonely, as if the entire world had abandoned them and looked at each other coldly. Bastard, that damn Straw Hat. I'll definitely teach you a lesson in the new world. An unwilling roar resounded through the sandstorm and spread to every corner of the world along with the awe-inspiring hurricane. A tall man with a broad figure and a fierce expression could be clearly seen. It was Crocodile, who was defeated by Straw Hat Luffy. At this moment he fled like a stray dog. The plan that he had painstakingly worked on for many years went bankrupt and failed. Not only that, but he was once again wanted by the government because he lost the title of Seven Warlords of the Sea. Crocodile's face turned green at the thought of it. This place is far away from the center of Alabasta. Only God knows where we escaped to. Robin followed closely behind Crocodile. Her voice was much lighter. It seemed that she was quite happy to have survived. Escaping such a long distance, they were finally far away from the Marines and Alabasta's forces. Not bad. In this way we finally escaped the pursuit of those rats. At this point, Crocodile's weary face burst into a ferocious smile. Over the years he had experienced too much and had long honed a tenacious heart. No, the president misunderstood what I meant. At this moment Robin suddenly said. Unlike the past, her voice was a lot weirder, hoarse and gloomy. Such a place, I think it's suitable for a cemetery. Crocodile was stunned and his eyes were subconsciously scattered. The surrounding creatures were forbidden, the sandstorm was everywhere, and there was not even a blade of grass, let alone humans. It's indeed a good cemetery, but it can be, what about being the president's cemetery? At this moment, Robin's eyes emitted a cold, murderous aura. She rushed in front of Crocodile and her white and tender fist was instantly swallowed by the dark armament haki. She mercilessly smashed towards Crocodile's head. Bang bang bang, Robin took advantage of the situation to launch an attack. Crocodile was not aware of it and was directly hit. The power contained in the young fist was beyond imagination. In an instant he was knocked down. The ground could not bear this powerful force and burst open. Cough cough cough. Crocodile in the soft sand pit spurted blood and looked at Robin with dull eyes. He subconsciously touched the wound on the left side of his face and the whole face had sunken. Because of the sudden incident, Crocodile didn't even have time to elementalize and was directly hit by Robin. You, how dare you betray me? Crocodile's voice was hoarse and low, like a dying beast, and his eyes were instantly swallowed by blood. I didn't expect you to have armament haki. I underestimated you. Betray you? What a load of nonsense. Robin is always my man. As my subordinate you can't even use armament haki. My subordinates should be omnipotent. In the sandstorm there was a distant and strange voice. Crocodile was stunned and his eyes subconsciously looked around. There was no one around. He couldn't think it was an illusion. A gust of wind suddenly came from behind. Crocodile subconsciously turned his head and saw Wu Qin with an indifferent expression. Of course there was also his maid Hancock. Chapter 721. Dustless's appearance immediately aroused Crocodile's vigilance. He stared at Dustless with cold eyes, and his whole body was uncontrollably erect. For Dustless, Crocodile had a deep fear in his soul. More than 10 years ago he was beaten by Dustless. The scene of him being beaten like a bug without any power to fight back still played in his mind. It was precisely because of Dustless that Crocodile would try to become stronger at all costs. Even because the pressure from Dustless was too great, he had the idea of ancient weapons. Everything he had today was thanks to Dustless. Hey, don't stare at me so fiercely. Seeing Crocodile staring at him, Dustless pretended to be afraid and hid behind Hancock, revealing half of his head, and looked at Crocodile timidly. Young master. Forget it, young master always likes to tease others like this. Hancock turned her head and looked at the fearful Wu Qin silently. Her beautiful face outlined a soul-stirring smile, which added a bit of enchanting charm. This little girl is getting more and more beautiful. Wu Qin shook his head and sighed with emotion. His eyes were dazzled for a while. Hancock's seductive aura was not deliberately faked. After eating this sweet, sweet fruit, her temperament changed. It was full of this kind of seductive charm that could make people commit crimes. In short, this was not her fault. You guys, seeing this, Crocodile's old face suddenly fell. A person's face was a tree's bark. Dustless ridiculed him like this. Crocodile, who had always valued self-esteem and honor more than his life, felt cold. There must be a bottom line to despise people. For world peace you don't have to go anywhere. You should die in peace. I feel that this place is the most suitable for your cemetery. Dustless chuckled. Looking around, the wind and sand were all over the sky, and sometimes sandstorms passed by. This was a natural cemetery. Even if there was no coffin, it would be covered by this violent wind and sand. Hearing this, Crocodile just smiled disdainfully, and his eyes were filled with madness and hysteria. Over the years he has worked hard. Compared to the past, he has improved with the change of the dimension. Do you still want to resist in vain? Robin asked with an unkind face. Resistance is necessary. When have you seen a crocodile who will wait for death? The more dangerous the environment is, the more powerful his combat power will be. This is all because of his survival mentality. Dustless said lightly, but the word resistance is wrong. This is just a one-sided annihilation. There is no resistance. Unilateral annihilation? Even if I die, I will drag you down with me. Crocodile roared madly and lost his usual calmness. His cold eyes stared at Nico Robin. For her, Crocodile's hatred index was even higher than Dustless. Over the years she has been careful. She did not expect to be defeated by a former subordinate. This made his proud heart unbearable. You can't even deal with a guy like Straw Hat Luffy. I advise you not to resist the young master, and let your head be taken off and die peacefully. Robin said coldly, her words full of murderous intent. You called him young master? Pointing to Dustless, Crocodile asked with a pale face. Only then did he suddenly realize that this deserted desert was led by Robin. Now it seems that he has become a turtle in a jar for Dustless. And Dustless can appear in this desert, indicating that Robin and Dustless have passed through in advance. I have treated you well, why did you betray me? Crocodile's eyes were locked on Robin as he gritted his teeth and asked. Even because of excessive anger, his mouth was full of visible blood. Everyone hates traitors the most. Boring. Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. In his eyes, this is just a manifestation of dispelling fear. Now that he is in a desperate situation, pirates like Crocodile have a fear of death. He hasn't completed his mission yet. How can he be willing to die? Dustless doesn't care about Crocodile. This kind of small character is not worthy of him to do it himself. He just gave Robin and Hancock a look. This means that Hancock and Robin should solve it. The two women looked at each other and didn't talk nonsense. They turned into a hurricane and roared out. The target was Crocodile. For Dustless's orders, they will follow them like God's orders. At the same time, there are amazing changes on the other side. Although Akiji carelessly let the Straw Hat Pirates slip away, he accidentally heard the traces of Robin and Crocodile and quickly took a group of Marines to the desert where Dustless and others were. As for who told Akiji, it was a passerby. Crocodile, a famous pirate in the world, has been talked about by the world for decades, and he has recently become the hero who saved Alabasta. It's hard to forget him. After Crocodile's conspiracy was exposed, he became the collective enemy of Alabasta. Everyone wants to get rid of him. Seeing that the admirals are looking for him, naturally they will not hide it. Water can carry a boat or overturn it. Crocodile tried to use these civilians and these people are enough to drown him. Chapter 722. A just cause enjoys abundant support, an unjust cause finds little support. This is an immutable truth. Crocodile has offended as many people as the stars in the sky. His own strength is useless, which naturally leads to his destruction. At the same time he was targeted by Dustless and Kazan. This is his own fault. In an unknown desert, yellow sand filled the sky as three figures intertwined with each other. The chaotic battle between them created a large vacuum area. Even the air within a radius of 100 meters had become abnormally hot due to the fluctuations from the intense battle between the three of them. The raging yellow sand detoured. Boom. Buff. With a dull sound, a black shadow flew out. Looking up, it was Crocodile who was hit by Hancock and Robin. Perhaps it was because both of them were women and they were both Wu Chen's subordinates, their cooperation was exceptionally intimate. Their smooth and flowing movements were flawless and full of a kind of alternative artistic feeling. Their elegant posture and skillful fighting skills were pleasing to the eye. Boom. Crocodile was blown away, and the soft sand was naturally destroyed. It splashed up like a wave, and the wind and sand were about 2 or 3 meters high in the air. After wandering in the sea for so many years, you haven't changed at all. You seem to have become a lot smarter. It seems that you have focused on conspiracies these years and forgot to improve your strength. The contempt in Dustless's eyes was clear, and he immediately understood Crocodile's intentions. This guy wanted to defeat him with external forces. It was just a daydream. Don't talk nonsense, don't be complacent. Crocodile, who stood up in the sand, roared. His roar was sharp and made people involuntarily have goosebumps. This guy still refuses to give up at this point. His willpower is tenacious. Hancock frowned and was a little surprised. Robin also nodded undeniably. She had been undercover for many years. She knew that Crocodile's will was comparable to steel. If she wanted to completely destroy him, she must have enough strength. Following their line of sight, Crocodile was dripping with blood. His whole body was filled with a strong smell of blood. His bones were also showing signs of being dented. This was all thanks to Robin and Hancock. Dustless would instruct the two women when he had time. Especially his personal maid, Hancock, was the most amazing. She was even able to fight with the generals. Robin was not as good as Hancock, but her strength was infinitely close to that of an admiral. Crocodile's disadvantage was extremely obvious. Now that the two women joined forces, they were inevitably humiliated and beaten. Even so, the dignity of a great pirate still supported Crocodile's will. Crocodile did not give up. What a stubborn fool. He should have just surrendered. Why did he have to end up like this? It's useless to resist. In the end, he still can't avoid the fate of death. Wuxia didn't understand and was puzzled. The current Crocodile was completely showing off his courage. Venting his anger in vain was just a manifestation of his powerlessness. It was just a deathbed struggle. According to the current situation, Crocodile, who was at the end of his rope, was still planning to turn over a new leaf. Desert Storm. Seeing the opportunity, Crocodile's eyes emitted a cold light. He waved his hands and a raging hurricane rushed out of his hands. Because this place was a desert, it had a geographical advantage. This high-density sandstorm seemed to have eaten hormones and instantly expanded dozens of times, turning into a hurricane that swept away the world. Whiz whiz whiz, the hurricane rotated at high speed like a divine pen, and the sharp storm that was thrown out was as sharp as a knife, and the sand that was affected would show a long and narrow knife mark. However, this destructive storm passed quietly from the side, avoiding Robin and Hancock. The target of the attack was Dustless, who stood indifferently behind them. You are not here to sightsee, and you are not here to see me make a fool of myself. Fight seriously. Crocodile shouted loudly, and then suddenly waved his big hand. The sandstorm rotated several times faster, and the range was the same. In the blink of an eye, it expanded more than 10 times. It directly swallowed Dustless into his stomach. Master! Robin and Hancock saw this scene and screamed out in worry. They did not expect Crocodile to be so despicable and cunning. He ignored the existence of the two of them and directly attacked Dustless. This is a big gift I prepared for him, no need to thank me. Ah! Crocodile was overjoyed and laughed crazily. However, at this moment in the center of the hurricane, a golden halo suddenly rose and Dustless's voice was heard. It was as plain as water, but it sounded harsh to Crocodile. To be fair, after so many years, you can still think about me all day and prepare a big gift for me. I am very happy. But, you actually used such a vulgar move that can be destroyed with a wave of your hand. You are as ignorant as Mariewa's brat back then. 10 years have passed in the blink of an eye. The insignificant insect of the past has become a giant in the ocean, yet you are still so unbearable. Ao 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 ao. In the storm, a terrifying roar came out as if an ancient god had broken out of the seal, roaring unscrupulously and full of joy. Then, in the tornado-shaped sandstorm, a mighty giant could be vaguely seen. The ferocious Tengu armor was clearly visible. Chapter 723. The ferocious Tengu armor, the mighty body, the head on the sky and the feet on the ground, made Crocodile sweat. His soul trembled when he was swept by the terrifying giant eye. Boom boom boom, the towering giant raised his blade and swung it down. The tachi of light swept out, and a tyrannical wind shot out from the tip of the blade. The massive sandstorm that was about to annihilate the world disappeared in an instant. The heavens and earth were solemn, as if even the heavens were afraid of the ancient giant. The silence was as still as water. They were like insects that could be easily suppressed, trampled, and destroyed with a wave of his hand. His pupils widened as he looked at the giant. Crocodile stopped breathing and his heart stopped beating. For a moment he was motionless like a sculpture. Short-sighted, what you saw before is just the tip of the iceberg. Raising his eyelids and looking at Crocodile with pity, Dustless's sarcasm disappeared in a flash. Pluto's weapon only exists in legends. It is unrealistic to use him to defeat Dustless. Legend has it that the fight between the two is enough to annihilate the world. At the same time, seeing Crocodile's sluggish expression, his body full of loopholes and flaws, Hancock and Robin looked at each other and nodded at the same time. Immediately they roared out like cannonballs. Boom, 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 the fragile desert ground suddenly exploded, and a bottomless black pit suddenly appeared on the desolate ground. Crockett was lying in it, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. His heartbeat is unusually weak. It seems that he is running out of oil and is infinitely close to the end of his life. Perhaps an ordinary civilian can kill this ferocious crocodile. I didn't expect the little girl of that year to be so unprecedented. I'm afraid that even a Marine admiral can only return without success when he meets the cooperation of the two of you. Removing the shocking Kinsusanu, Dustless was like a breeze, quietly falling between Hancock and Robin, and his thin hands like willow branches wrapped around the waists of the two women. Immediately, he stared at the half-dead crocodile in the deep pit and looked at the broken corners of his clothes scattered around him, and his left eye turned extremely. Heavenly hand power. In an instant, space and time were reversed, and the world in front of him was different from before. In the blink of an eye, he crossed the layers of space and came in front of Crocodile. Hancock and Robin looked at each other and could see the horror in each other's eyes. It was just a blink of an eye, but they were shuttling through space. Immediately, they were shocked to feel the tender little hand on their waist, and their faces turned red, but they did not resist. After 10 years, all the grievances in the past had been erased. Now, Dustless was the only person Robin and Hancock were loyal to. The present Wuxian was just their everything for the rest of their long lives. Cough, cough, cough. Dustless crocodile, 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 and crocodile, crocodile, and looked at him. Crocodile's Dustless. Was Dustless. So that's how it is, Crocodile laughed at himself. He knew that God didn't need to be angry or happy. He just needed to watch his ugly and clumsy performance to please him. You are still so young, it seems that time has not left a trace on you. Crocodile bowed his head and said in an unusual tone. Looking up, Wu Chen's appearance was still the same as it had been 10 years ago. There was no difference between him 10 years ago and 10 years later. They were completely carved from the same mold. Because I have struggled out of the shackles of time, and become the only one among human beings. Recalling his life, Dustless's tone was quite emotional. The sea turned into mulberry fields, the stars moved, and all things in the world could not resist the corrosion of time. So far, only Dustless and Kagaya have jumped out of it and become the rare surpassers in history. This endless journey, now only Kagaya and he are going hand in hand. The next time is to find the way to immortality for other confidants. If you didn't betray me, my plan wouldn't have failed. It's all because of you, Nico Robin? Crocodile screamed. Due to his excessive anger, his pale face regained its rosy color before his death. At this point you're already at the end of your rope, yet you're still so hysterical. Who do you think has been controlling your life for the past 10 years? Is everything really accidental? It's a big mistake. It's all inevitable that I wrote the script for you. The corner of Dustless's mouth raised. He ignored Crocodile's absent-mindedness and said in a low voice, You think you recruited Robin, stupid. All of this is the result of my deliberate arrangement. Including you, you are secretly controlled by me, but you are too arrogant to realize it, thinking that all of this is the product of your own wisdom, naive. This is just an opportunity for me to arrange Robin to sneak into the Straw Hat Pirates. Dustless told the truth indifferently. Impossible, do you really think you are a god and can perfectly predict any details of the future? Crocodile roared in disbelief as he thought of his years of hard work. Looking up, he tried to find a lying expression on Dustless's cold face, but Dustless's expression didn't change and he always maintained a calm look. Looking at Crocodile's eyes, he was full of sympathy and pity. For such a person, Dustless disdains to lie to him, it's just a simple waste, that's all. Chapter 724. Crocodile tried to hide his panic. No one wanted to be someone else's pawn, especially someone as arrogant as Crocodile. He can use others, but others can't use him. Stupid, you always seem to like to be smart and think that you are omnipotent. Glancing at the struggling Crocodile, Dustless's heart was full of disapproval. This kind of person is always centered on himself. He can calculate others, but he can't calculate himself. Do you really think this is all a coincidence? Dream on. After a deep glance at Crocodile, Dustless said meaningfully, What do you mean? Staring at Dustless's eyes, Crocodile suddenly realized that something was wrong and his face changed greatly. Don't tell me. Looking at Robin's disdainful face, Crocodile's expression changed greatly. Since he contacted Robin, his whereabouts began to be gradually exposed so that now everyone knows about it. It seems that you are not stupid, you can still be saved. Seeing Crocodile's expression, Dustless couldn't help but nod and whisper, I ordered Robin to deliberately expose her whereabouts, to attract Marine's attention. Marine's high-level officials are not idiots. They are all shrewd old foxes. Crocodile is an ambitious Shichibukai, and Nico Robin is the only person in the world who can interpret the poneglyph. The two sides came together to premeditate something. The old fox Sengoku will naturally not let Crocodile go. You bastard! I will definitely tear you into pieces. Crocodile roared angrily. He boasted of being smart and peerless. He didn't expect that all this was led by Dustless. His heart beat violently uncontrollably and seemed to break out of his chest. His cold eyes were full of blood, dense like a spider web. In the dark, Crocodile's body seemed to be floating with blood mist. The cold murderous intent froze the space, and some moisture contained in the atmosphere was condensed into ice dregs. What's your purpose? Forcibly suppressing the burning rage in his heart, Crocodile asked in a gloomy and hoarse voice, You planted the traitor Nicole Robin beside me for the ancient weapon, Pluto? Crocodile was not a saint. Being used by others, he would naturally be angry. Ancient weapon? Perhaps, but that kind of thing is dispensable. Dustless looked at the distant void and said casually, It's not that I don't have any so-called dreams in my life. If I have to force myself to find a goal, it's actually very simple. Perhaps you'll find it laughable. I just want to roam the clouds freely, that's all. When Wu Chen's words fell, Robin and Hancock looked at Wu Chen in confusion. They didn't seem to understand the meaning of his words. Their eyes were full of confusion and hesitation. In your dreams? Crocodile sneered and denied after a brief moment of absent-mindedness. Strolling in the clouds, these four simple and casual words contained a monstrous ambition. Since ancient times, there was only one kind of creature that could walk in the clouds and see the sky as their backyard. It was as if they were strolling in the courtyard and overlooking the masses. God! Crocodile sneered and tried to hide his panic. Thinking of all the past experiences, now he finally had an epiphany. In the past, Dustless didn't take anything seriously. Everything was just a show to please him. Dream? What do you think is the difference between humans and God? Strength status? In reality, it's not. Wu Chen turned a deaf ear to Crocodile's question. He raised his head and stared at the void in the distance. His awe-inspiring and deep eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the layers of voids and point to the bright Milky Way in the depths of the vast universe. The world in front of him was just the second stop for Dustless. The vast universe was his journey. God is a plaything, but humans are fighting for every inch of land. First of all, there is a huge contrast in thinking. Throw away the old vision of the past and try to stand on a new high point to overlook the world. You will suddenly feel that the world will be a lot more interesting, but you, who are about to die, can't understand this feeling. Dustless just smiled at Crocodile's ridicule. He didn't need to explain to a dying person, nor did he need to waste his breath. It would be too ungentlemanly to argue with a dying person. He raised his thumb indifferently and gathered high-density photons. This weak light seemed soft, but it made Crocodile, who was on the verge of despair, feel a fatal threat. The light beam was enough to easily penetrate him. Go to hell! As soon as his voice fell, a ray of light shot out. The sharp flash of light was extremely strong and unstoppable. It easily cut open Crocodile's abdomen, and a scorched black hole suddenly appeared in his lower abdomen. There was a stench all over. The hole in the chest was where the heart was. It was a fatal blow. Crocodile's breath was extremely weak in an instant. His face was as pale as paper and his eyes were blank. It seemed that he used his last moments to recall how short his life was. Let's go, his heart has been destroyed by me. Even God can't save him. Leaving only a sentence in the sky, Dustless and his servants turned into a breeze and floated away. In this deep pit, there was only Crocodile who would die in a moment. The barren desert was isolated from the world. It was self-evident what awaited Crocodile. Chapter 725. Crocodile is just a small character who is not worth mentioning on the Grand Line. The reason why the position of Shichibukai was given to this kid was barely a stroke of luck. Of course, it is undeniable that his wisdom and strength also played a certain role. In the dancing sandstorm, the vague outline of the sanddame was clearly visible. Master, what's wrong with you? Is there something wrong? Dustless's footsteps suddenly halted. Then he turned around leisurely and looked at the void behind him. His eyes were as deep as water. His eagle-like sharp eyes seemed to be able to see through the heavy sandstorm. His sight was fixed on Crocodile. In the dark, Dustless saw Crocodile's intact appearance. "Go back," Wuxia said coldly with a cold smile on his face. Both Robin and Hancock were stunned and looked at Dustless. They looked at his firm and unshakable eyes and couldn't say much. After all, Dustless is the master of the two of them. "Master, you want to ask why I went back?" Dustless waved to interrupt Hancock and strolled back. Dustless glanced at Hancock and Hancock. "The reason is very simple, because the fish that should fall has already taken the bait." Robin and Hancock looked at Dustless in confusion, and their eyes were full of curiosity. "You two are always too simple." Seeing the eyes of the two women, Dustless couldn't help but sigh. The strength of these two women is indescribable, but in some aspects of thinking, they are too simple and ignorant. Crocodile is just a small character with a bounty of 81 million berries. Although he is a Shichibukai, he knows some things that he shouldn't know, which explains the problem. "Master, are you talking about the source of Pluto?" Robin asked with a flash of light in her eyes. Dustless heard the words and looked at Robin unexpectedly, and immediately nodded undeniably. Crocodile's identity is humble, and his strength is weak. It is extremely unreasonable for him to know the existence of Pluto. Thinking about the top-secret information White Zetsu had collected over the years, Dustless frowned. If he guessed correctly, the source of Crocodile's information about Pluto was actually the Revolutionary Army. In other words, he might just be a pawn being used. To put it bluntly, it was very likely that they were the lackeys of the Revolutionary Army. In the large deep pit, Crocodile felt his vitality rapidly fading away. The moment he was about to close his eyes and wait for death, the whole earth suddenly trembled and dust splashed up a few meters high. She subconsciously opened her eyes, and the first thing she saw was a tall figure. The newcomer had a huge face with abnormally large dark purple eyes, thick eyelashes, light blue eyeshadow and purple lip gloss. Her clothes were also rather strange, with mesh stockings and a cloak and a tight, ultra-low-cut jumpsuit. It looked strange, but Crocodile seemed to have found a life-saving straw. He suddenly opened his eyes, and his desperate eyes glowed with a strong vitality. "Hurry up and save me. With your level, saving me shouldn't be a problem." "No matter what," Crocodile shouted loudly, and his tone was vaguely commanding. It was not difficult to see that the relationship between the two was unusually familiar. If there were other high-level Marines, they would be surprised to find that this person was a senior cadre of the Revolutionary Army, known as the Devil King Ambrose Ivankov. "Are you ordering me?" the Shemale King Ivankov asked in an unfriendly tone. They were just in a cooperative relationship. No, even cooperation was a bit far-fetched. It was just a disguised use of Crocodile to find the trace of Pluto. Any move of the Revolutionary Army was strictly controlled by the government. Revealing the news to Crocodile was just using him for revenge. However, things didn't go as planned. This guy failed, but it was also expected. "This is not an order. You know our relationship. It's not good for anyone to know about it." Crocodile was not afraid at all. He was calm and once again showed his true colors. "The Revolutionary Army should still need me. Otherwise you wouldn't have rushed over. If you know what's good for you, quickly heal me. Otherwise you won't get any top-secret information." After he finished speaking, Crocodile closed his eyes and waited for his death. "You humph." Ivankov's eyes flashed with cold killing intent, then he snorted and stepped forward to heal Crocodile. Ivankov's medical skills were brilliant. He had easily saved people who doctors thought were incurable and a country on the verge of death. He was the strongest Devil King in history. Time passed quietly and half an hour passed in a blink of an eye. Crocodile, who still felt that his life was in danger half an hour ago, gradually recovered his ruddy complexion, and the internal organs that were cut open and burned were working again. This feeling, "It's been a long time." Standing up, Crocodile said. "Long time? It's indeed a blessing to survive, but unfortunately this is only temporary. Some things can never be changed." The indifferent voice resounded through the endless sky, like a thunderbolt, making people's eardrums almost burst, and they looked in the direction of the sound. "You didn't leave?" Seeing Dustless appear quietly, Crocodile's eyes were full of fear and retreating. After dying once, he knew how precious life was and how hard it was to get it. Dustless just glanced at Crocodile slightly, then his eyes fell on Ivankov. "No wonder I'm gradually out of control of Dolag. If I didn't guess wrong, it's also because of your brilliant medical skills. With a genius doctor like you, no wonder the Revolutionary Army has been around for a long time. But all your movements are under control. The reason why Crocodile is left alive is nothing more than to lure you into the trap. After all, if he dies, you can't show your superb medical skills. Chapter 726. Ivankov's face turned green. Like Crocodile, his broad and rough face was filled with fear. This terrifying person who easily defeated Durag was not to be underestimated. He was a forbidden existence that could not be touched. He could only look up, unable to look at him. To be honest, your medical skills are so superb, it's really surprising. During the conversation, Dustless's body completely ignored the existence of gravity and floated in front of Ivankov and Crocodile. Nico, Robin, and Hancock also followed. He stared at Crocodile and Ivankov. Dustless was fine, but the appearance of Robin immediately aroused Crocodile's hatred. He stared at Robin fiercely and his eyes almost popped out. You actually guessed that I would come to his aid. Ivankov's face was pale, and he instinctively suspected that there was a traitor in the Revolutionary Army. With a chuckle, Dustless explained, "This is very simple. Decades ago, when you contacted Crocodile, the Revolutionary Army was already under my control. White Zetsu had been ordered to monitor the movements of the Revolutionary Army and Crocodile. By the way, your ability should not belong to the category of treatment." Dustless's deep eyes sparkled, and he looked at Ivankov with a little surprise. "In a sense, I have used the ability of Rinnegan to modify Durag's memory, but you can still make him change back. This kind of disease can't be cured at will." Dustless used Rinnegan to modify Durag's memory, but Ivankov in front of him could restore Durag's memory. Dustless was naturally surprised. "Doctor? I never said that I was a doctor." Although his strength was not as good as Dustless, Ivankov could not be captured. He was not afraid at all, and his words revealed unprecedented firmness. Now there were only two ways to go: to fight to the death or to wait for death. He naturally chose the former. "Of course I know that. You're a paramecia user, not a simple doctor. You're a human engineer who can transform people from the inside. The ability user's healing hormone can give people with incurable diseases a chance to be saved, but at the cost of several years of their lifespan," Dustless explained with a smile. In fact, Dustless knew that he was releasing a tiger back to the mountain when he let Durag go. "How about now? Are you two going to put on the collar yourselves, or?" Death's charming eyes. Before Dustless could finish his words, Ivankov took the initiative to launch an attack. He blinked his eyes abruptly and pounced directly at Dustless. Naive, helplessly shaking his head, Dustless easily used elementalization to avoid the impact of the storm, while Hancock and Robin easily dodged sideways. "What are you looking at? Run, you idiot!" Ivankov glared at Crocodile and cursed. Then he turned into a gust of wind and disappeared, stirring up a violent sandstorm. Looking up, Crocodile's eyes were blood red as he stared at Robin with resentment. He then turned around and fled. Facing Dustless, he really couldn't summon the strength to resist. His pride and dignity had been completely crushed. Without any nonsense, Crocodile's body also elementalized and he turned into a sandstorm to escape. Running away was also a skill. This was a matter of life and death, and Crocodile and Ivankov had done everything they could to the fullest. Run? It's meaningless. Staring at the gradually disappearing afterimage, Wu Chen's mouth curved into a cold arc. He suddenly lifted his right foot and attracted countless photons like a black hole. It contained a powerful force that was enough to destroy a mountain. Light speed kick. The moment his voice fell, the light gathered at Dustless's right foot gushed out and turned into a straight beam that swallowed Ivankov. Boom, boom. The ear-piercing explosion resounded through the sky. The sky was cloudless for thousands of miles. Suddenly, a large flame rose and the dark smoke burned hundreds of meters high. On the soft sand, a deep pit that was tens of meters wide suddenly appeared. Boom. Ivankov's body was scorched. Due to the explosion of the light speed kick, there were black burn wounds all over his body, and the clothes on his upper body were full of holes. As for you, Dustless's cold eyes fell on Crocodile's body. He had a playful smile on his face like a cat playing with a mouse. He had to kill a person twice. It was the first time in his life that he experienced such a situation. The palm of his right hand covered the storm that Crocodile turned into, and a strong gravitational force erupted. 10,000 heavenly attraction. The palm of his hand turned into a dark hole, as if it was connected to the dark abyss of the universe. The terrifying gravitational force was enough to tear any matter in the world. Every move was different from person to person. The strong would strengthen themselves and the weak would weaken themselves. The 10,000 things heaven's pull used by Dustless was hundreds of times stronger than the vortex Nagato. Within a radius of 1 kilometer, everything was bound by this gravitational force. Damn it. Aware of the abnormality in his body, Crocodile's face changed dramatically. The majestic gravitational force pulled his body, and it was difficult to move forward. Crocodile's face turned into determination, and he cancelled the elemental transformation without hesitation. Ivankov can do physical transformation. I heard that any injury can be resurrected, but I have always been curious. If I twist off your head, can you still be resurrected? Chapter 727. Crocodile's soul trembled and a cold chill shrouded him. His whole body seemed to be frozen and he lost the ability to react. Swish, swish, swish. The sharp sound of breaking the air rushed over. In almost a blink of an eye, Dustless crossed layers of space and appeared on the right side of Crocodile. What followed was his leg that was emitting golden light. Lightspeed kick. Crocodile's pupils suddenly shrank. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The earth-shattering power even broke his whole body. Boom, boom, boom. The bright light was released instantly, and the luster of destruction jumped out. Crocodile was destroyed by Dustless's overwhelming power in just a moment. He was easily kicked hundreds of meters away. Ka-ka-ka, the crisp and pleasant sound of bones was heard. Only those with sharp eyes could see that Crocodile's chest was deeply sunken, and his ribs were almost shattered instantly. In just a short gap of a few breaths, the Ladyboy King Ivankov and Crocodile were defeated by invincible strength. This guy's body doesn't seem to be human anymore. His endurance is not bad, but that's all. Ivankov struggled to pull his head out of the desert. His face was as pale as paper, and his eyes flashed with lingering fear from time to time. Looking at the calm Dustless, he couldn't help but have goosebumps all over his body. This guy, no wonder he could defeat Dorak. If I hadn't transformed my body before, I would have been killed in seconds just now. Ivankov's eyes were filled with fear, and at the same time, his eyes were jumping and flashing with a strange light. I have to think of a life-saving strategy. Frowning, Ivankov thought of a strategy in his heart and increased the operation of his brain cells to the extreme. However, for a long time he still couldn't think of a suitable life-saving strategy. His strength was not as good as others and his speed was 1,000 miles behind. Even his IQ was perfectly crushed by Dustless. Ivankov's eyes turned black when he thought about it. The world in front of him had abandoned him. It seems like you're already at the end of your rope. How disappointing. I thought you would still have a pleasing performance, but it seems like I was thinking too much. You should stop here. A ray of light flashed, and Wuxia appeared in front of Ivankov instantly. He put his hands in his trouser pockets, and his face was filled with boredom and disappointment. As for Crocodile, he was almost eliminated. He was finished off by a casual lightspeed kick. Ivankov's body had been modified. Although his endurance was extremely high, he would probably be eliminated by the next kick. There was no comparison at all. The difference between the dimensions of both sides was too great. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. Crocodile and Ivankov were crushed like ants. Cough, cough, cough. How dare you be so arrogant? Standing up with difficulty, Ivankov finally chose to continue to resist, because the result of obeying Dustless was to be locked in the dark impelled down, and this was the best result. If he was unlucky, he would be directly obliterated. Just like Crocodile, who was almost crippled by Dustless's kick. Milky Way wink. Seeing Dustless's lazy and bored face, a hurricane dozens of times stronger than the Death's charming eyes came. Boom, 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 the ferocious storm destroyed the world. The hurricane thrown out by the high-speed rotation frequency was unstoppable. It was like a knife tossing the sand into a desolation. Poochie poochie. In an instant, Dustless, who was motionless like a sculpture, was swallowed. The sound of flesh being cut was chilling. The storm of swords seemed to be able to cut steel. Haha, this time you brat, what kind of joke is this? The proud face suddenly froze. Ivankov's pupils dilated, and he looked at Dustless who was walking out of the storm. He was petrified as if he saw a ghost. Intact? It must be because of my old eyes. Ivankov rubbed his eyes and Dustless was intact. His clothes were clean, his face was ruddy, and his breathing was extremely rhythmic. Obviously he was very healthy. Not to mention severely injuring Dustless, even his clothes showed no signs of being damaged. It was as if the attack was directly ignored and filtered. What's so surprising about being intact? Did you expect to defeat me with this ridiculous trick? You really can't be judged by the eyes of ordinary people. Looking carefully at the sluggish Ivankov, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. He had lost interest. A fight between children, let's stop here. Don't waste my time. Staring at the stones around Ivankov, Dustless's expression gradually turned cold. Heavenly hand power. Activating the ability of Rinnegan, he directly appeared behind Ivankov, holding an ancient tachi in his hand, which was filled with the vicissitudes of life and inauspiciousness. Staring at Ivankov in front of him, Dustless's eyes flashed with contempt. The gap between them was too big and it was difficult to arouse his interest. Clang. The first-generation ghost blade in his hand was unsheathed, and there was a roar of steel. When Ivankov reacted, his face changed drastically. When he was about to dodge, it was already too late. The first-generation ghost blade had already cut his body, leaving an unerasable mark. Pucci. Blood splashed everywhere. Ivankov's back was torn open, and there were many ghastly wounds on it. His strength was gone in an instant and he fell to the ground unwillingly, losing his consciousness. Only my weak breathing could be heard. Chapter 728. Yellow sand filled the sky, and the world in their line of sight was a blur of vicissitudes. The visibility in the surroundings was less than 1 meter, and the cold wind mixed with particles made people not dare to open their eyes. Even their faces would feel an unusual piercing pain. The soft sand flowed with scarlet blood, which looked dazzling. In the pool of blood, Ivankov's breath was weak and he had lost consciousness. His whole body was drenched in blood. There was no doubt that as long as Dustless slightly increased his strength, this world-famous transvestite king would step into the door of the underworld. "Master, don't you need to kill him?" Hancock and Robin asked. Their shining eyes were full of fanaticism. Dustless's strength was so exaggerated that only an admiral could barely deal with Dustless. But it was just barely. Kill him. Dustless looked at Hancock and Robin with surprise. Even a 3-year-old child could kill Ivankov. However, to Dustless's surprise, Hancock and Robin were so decisive. Robin was okay, she had been wandering in the outside world for many years and had witnessed too many sinister people. It was understandable that she chose to kill him to protect herself. Hancock had followed Dustless for many years, but she had never killed a chicken. Now, she easily said that she would kill Ivankov, indicating that she had made a choice in her heart. This guy doesn't need to be killed for the time being. There are still many unsolved mysteries to be solved. As for Crocodile, I can only say sorry, unfortunately he will die. Now in this world, only Crocodile knew that Robin was Dustless's subordinate. In order to seal his mouth, Crocodile would naturally shut up forever. But he won't slip away, Dustless suddenly said as he stared indifferently into the distance. This guy's body is strange, if we leave him alone he will definitely run away. Hancock and Robin said with a little worry. Don't worry about it. A nobody will always be a nobody. Even if you give him a stage to show his talent, he will make a fool of himself. His clown-like rough acting skills will also make people laugh. Wu Chen waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to worry about it. What's more, under his majestic perception, Akiji has already arrived with a large number of marines, and Ivankov will inevitably be captured and sent to impel down. Dustless stared at Ivankov, who was lying in a pool of blood, and left in a flash. Ivankov had already been severely injured and had lost consciousness. It was impossible for him to escape in his current state. I can't die here. In the future, I must find that bastard and Nico Robin for revenge. I can't let them live so freely, absolutely. In the howling sandstorm, Crocodile dragged his tired body and forced himself forward. With every step he took, his body would sway and give off a nauseating smell. Instinctively, he was already at the end of his rope, and it was only a matter of time before he stepped into the kingdom of heaven. However, with the support of his will to live and his unprecedented hatred for Robin, he miraculously regained a brand new vitality. Without taking revenge on Dustless and Robin, Crocodile was unwilling to die like this. Are you still having this kind of unrealistic dream? Ridiculous guy, are you really one of the 7 warlords of the sea? Sometimes I think you are more like a kid who hasn't grown up yet, Otherwise, you wouldn't have such a naive dream. The golden rainbow fell from the sky, and Crocodile, who was unaware of it, was enveloped by this dazzling light, and then he saw Dustless falling from the sky. Bang bang bang, the powerful force could not be resisted and easily suppressed Crocodile. The ground trembled and immediately splashed up several meters of dust. Revenge on me? And Robin maybe. But this kind of distant dream, if you want to realize it, it's better to leave it to the next life. Stepping on Crocodile's head, Dustless's face was frivolous. With a contemptuous smile on his mouth, Dustless sometimes felt that Crocodile's idea was really naive. As he once said, dreams can only be talked about by people with strength. Right now he was nothing more than a stray dog. Even his own little life could vanish into thin air at any time, yet he was still so hysterically thirsting for revenge. He thought that the goddess of fate would continue to favor him. That was wishful thinking. I've said it before. For the sake of world peace you should die. Now you've been killed twice by me. You can even close your eyes peacefully under the 9 hells. This is the first time you've enjoyed such treatment. Thank God for his blessing. Farewell. The dazzling golden flash gathered at his fingertips, and Dustless aimed at Crocodile's eyebrows. The light was sharp enough to penetrate everything, and Crocodile's heart was in his throat. No, I don't have laser Poochie. The ferocious and ruthless beam of light easily penetrated Crocodile's head. He suddenly stopped his unwilling roar, and the whole world was quiet. It also marks the fall of a generation of heroes. At the same time, a large group of Marines led by Akiji finally arrived and finally saw the shadow. Dustless had already let Robin, the ace undercover, slip away in advance, leaving only him and Hancock. What you did was really ruthless. You killed a Shichibukai. That guy seems to be a senior cadre of the Revolutionary Army, and he seems to be dying. Looking at the messy battlefield, Akiji couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 729. Especially Crocodile's miserable death, Akiji couldn't help but sigh with emotion. His heart was also filled with mixed feelings. The burnt hole in his head was obviously dead. Even if the gods were in the world, it would be difficult to bring the dead back to life. Looking at Crocodile, it was not difficult to see from his incredible expression that he did not realize that he would fall. How can the Revolutionary Army have anything to do with the Shichibukai? Akiji was puzzled as he looked around Crocodile and Ivankov. Hearing this, Dustless just glanced at Akiji. The source of the ancient weapon should belong to the Revolutionary Army, and he is just a pawn. Looking at Crocodile, whose body was covered with sand, Dustless affirmed, a pawn like him is just a shield pushed to the front to attract attention. Once the news of Pluton is found, I am afraid that he will be killed by the Revolutionary Army hidden in the dark. Dustless remembered in his previous life that Crocodile and Ivankov had a close relationship. Even after being imprisoned and impelled down, Ivankov threatened Crocodile for some mysterious reason, so that he had to help Straw Hat Luffy escape from prison. My task is over, and I will leave the rest to you, Kazan. Without waiting for Akiji to respond, Dustless and Hancock passed by and went straight to the center of Alabasta. The human demon King Ivankov was on the verge of death. Crocodile had fallen. Everything was over. Wait a minute. Akiji spoke to stop Dustless from moving forward, and his questioning tone was full of curiosity. Judging from the traces of the fight, if I'm not mistaken, he has been subdued by you. Why did you kill him? Akiji's tone was slightly dissatisfied. Marines are not murderous butchers in the name of justice. Since he has been subdued, there is no need to kill Crocodile, just put him and impel down. Looking at Kazan faintly, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. Akainu could become a fleet admiral in the future. Now the sea is unprecedentedly chaotic, and only Akainu's idea of eliminating everything is in line with the current trend. Women's kindness will only make pirates more rampant. I am the one who thinks you are poisoned by Z. Looking at Akiji's stern eyes, Wuchin said calmly. It was an immutable truth that harsh punishments were needed in troubled times. An alternative kind like Akiji would sometimes push the whole world into a more uncontrollable troubled time. There is no market for your old-fashioned ideas in this era, Kazan. Before Dustless could speak, a powerful voice with disdain came. Looking up, it was Akainu, Sakazuki, and Kizaru, Borsellino. Sengoku really put in a lot of effort to get Robin this time. Squinting his eyes, Dustless was slightly surprised. At the same time, the number of the 3 admirals, including him, the number, and the number of the 4 admirals too. This is enough to prove the importance of Nico Robin. To some extent, getting Nico Robin is equivalent to indirectly getting the dominance of the world. Looking at the world, only he can interpret the poneglyph and find the historical truth that was painstakingly buried by the world government. Of course, it is also related to the whereabouts of ancient weapons. What a delightful scene of killing each other. He didn't say anything to stop it. Dustless was delighted to see this scene. Akiji's eyes flashed with anger, and his palms were uncontrollably clenched into fists. Because he and Sakazuki have different ideas, although the two sides maintain the relationship of colleagues on the surface, in fact they are divided. People who are tainted with evil will be punished by justice. Even if they are all locked up in the Impel Down, their sins will not be washed away. Akainu said coldly as he looked at Crocodile and Ivankov. His whole body was covered with hot magma, and his murderous look made it seem that he even wanted to kill the half-dead Ivankov. The Marine's justice is not bloodthirsty, otherwise I don't think there is any difference between them and pirates, Kazan said without fear. The momentum of the two men is equal, and it seems that there is the possibility of a big battle. In the Marine, the discord between Akainu and Akiji is also known. It seems that some things have been destined for many years and it can't be changed if you want to. It was precisely because of the discord between Akainu and Akiji that Akiji was unfortunately defeated in the Fleet Admiral battle, and eventually retired from the Marine. If it wasn't for the Sengoku period, the internal strife may have broken out. Akiji became the Fleet Admiral, and there will be no position for Akainu in the Marine. On the contrary, if Akainu became the Fleet Admiral, there will be no position for Akiji. Unfortunately, it's estimated that they can't fight, otherwise this once-in-a-lifetime scene can't be missed. Seeing that the two were just talking, Dustless said. Hancock didn't know whether to laugh or cry looking at Wu Qin. He couldn't help but feel speechless. As an admiral of the Marine, instead of stopping them, he was looking forward to a big fight between the two of them. Hancock was helpless. Let's go. Shooting a glance at the two people, Dustless swaggered off. Seeing Dustless leave, Akainu and others did not stop him. Perhaps they and Dustless are not the same kind of creatures, and they want Dustless to leave as soon as possible. Kizaru and Akainu have already arrived at Alabasta. They don't want to know that the entire Alabasta is surrounded by Marines. Without Dustless's help, it will be difficult for Robin to escape from Alabasta. Chapter 730. Dustless was too lazy to participate in the grievances of the three admirals, and he didn't have time to meddle in their business. There were too many things involved behind this. Akainu could hook up with the world government, and Kuzan was the first choice of the fleet admiral. To some extent, this was a conflict between the Marine and the world government. Dustless only needed to stay out of it and there was no need for him to get involved. In fact, Dustless hoped that Akiji and Akainu would fight, and the Marine admirals would kill each other, and the situation would be more chaotic. He could also take the opportunity to fish in troubled waters and gain greater benefits. But it should be impossible. After all, there is the existence of Kizaru. Today's chaotic world has been divided up by one piece: the world government, Marines, including the Revolutionary Army. What is left for Wu Qin are all crooked melons and cracked dates. Therefore, in order to obtain greater benefits, the world order must first collapse first. In the dense city, there was an endless stream of people passing by. After Straw Hat Luffy defeated Crocodile, the city seemed to have regained its former vitality. The kingdom in the desert, Alabasta, had a refreshing scenery. Dustless and Hancock walked in the crowd, both of them wearing heavy coats. His identity as a Marine admiral has been known to the world in recent years, and it was necessary to cover it up. Robin. Kids nowadays seem to like playing hide-and-seek with adults. This kind of boring game really can't arouse the slightest interest. Wu Qin, who was wearing a hat, lowered the brim of his hat and looked slightly helpless. After looking for a long time, he didn't find any trace of Robin. Obviously, she deliberately hid to keep him in suspense. Robin has been outside for many years and her hidden means are perfect. Even the master can't find her. Hancock's face showed a charming dimple and she looked very proud. Perfect and flawless? Maybe. Dustless's clear eyes looked at Hancock, and his eyes had a different meaning. Master, what's wrong with you? Seeing Dustless staring at her, Hancock's smile solidified and she asked curiously. If I didn't expose you, little girl, you would have thought that your trick was perfect. Dustless said inexplicably. Her little white hand reached for Hancock's face, and a special energy fluctuation appeared in her palm, and Hancock's mask shattered. Robin's true body was revealed. Young master, how do you know I am not Hancock? Robin's tone was surprised and uncertain. With this simple disguise technique, she had deceived countless Marine spies. It wasn't until today that Dustless revealed a flaw. It must be because the young master is too strong. Too strong? This has nothing to do with strength. Hearing this, Dustless shook his head decisively and then replied plainly, I have been with Hancock for more than 10 years. Her slightest movements and her smell are deeply imprinted in my mind. You can imitate her movements and even her accent, but you can't imitate Hancock's unique temperament. Humans were the spirits of all living things. Everyone had their own unique temperament, and it was not something that could be easily imitated. Hancock's smell? And her unique temperament? Is that the reason? I thought this simple disguise technique was perfect and could deceive everyone. Robin said disappointedly. Idiot, how can such a claptrap be perfect? There is no perfect thing in the world, and I hate the word perfect. Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. This little disguise technique was taught to Robin by him. It could deceive ordinary people, but for those experienced pirates, it was just asking for humiliation. Let's go. I'll take you to see the person you've been dreaming of. With a gentle arc at the corner of his mouth, Wuxia turned around and went into the dark alley. Young master hates perfection. It's incredible. Isn't young master the kind of person who always pursues the limit? Robin asked curiously. Combined with Dustless's past experience, Robin believed that he has always been the kind of person who pursues the limit and perfects himself to a perfect degree. The pursuit of the limit and the pursuit of perfection are two different things. After perfection, it means that you can't make any progress. This is not what I want to see. Dustless turned and explained. Robin nodded thoughtfully, but looking at her confused appearance, it was obvious that she didn't understand. By the way, is there such a person I dream of seeing? Robin frowned slightly and made a distressed look. She still couldn't figure out who it was. Since my mother died, Is it possible that young master wants to help me resurrect my mother? Robin cried with joy. Because she was too excited, her face became red. She used to think that resurrecting her mother was just an excuse for Dustless to deceive her. She never thought that Dustless would help resurrect her mother at this moment. Yes, this kind of small problem is solved as soon as possible. Dustless nodded undeniably. Small problem? Hearing this, Robin's head was full of black lines and her face was full of speechlessness. Bringing people back to life is a small problem. She can't think of what the big problem in Dustless's eyes is. Perhaps there is no big problem in young master's eyes. Staring at Dustless's back, Robin suddenly felt very far away, extraordinarily ethereal and untouchable. The figure in front of her seemed to dissipate like a cloud at any time. Chapter 731. In the dark warehouse, there was a strange smell and from time to time, there was a shrill squeak of mice. Obviously, no one has lived in this place for a long time. It has been abandoned for many years and it is full of stench. With the faint sunlight coming in through the window, they could vaguely see a few quiet shadows passing by, silent. Even the cunning mice didn't notice them, they just felt a gust of wind. They didn't want to know that these people were extraordinary. Even if you didn't prepare enough berries this time, you didn't have to find such a place to wait for me to cast sorcery. Dustless complained in the dark space. Over the years, his life has become more and more comfortable, and he is quite uncomfortable with this pungent stench. Master, you have to put up with it. It happened suddenly and you didn't inform me in advance. Hancock said helplessly, it's not that she is forgetful. This is the first time she came out with Dustless. Before, in Mariehua she never needed berries. She can just ask the staff of the world government to do whatever she needs. Forget it, there is no need to go to this place. Anyway, your mother's body is stored in other places by me. There is no need to go to this disgusting place. At this moment, Dustless suddenly said. Hancock and Robin looked at each other and nodded at the same time. Dustless' will, words and actions, and any orders issued by him are the instructions of God for the two women, and they only need to respect him. Seeing this, Dustless's pupils turned sharply and turned into scarlet eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. When the scarlet eyes looked at each other, there was a kind of panic. In that case then, Kemue. The void in front of him distorted, showing a huge darkness, exuding a majestic devouring power, and even because the power was too strong, the whole space began to distort and deform. Hancock and Robin instinctively struggled. Dustless shook his head and cast a reassuring look at the two women. Hancock and Robin's resistance stopped. Dustless didn't need to harm them and he didn't need to harm them. If he didn't like them he could just kill them. His eyes suddenly widened and an even more evil eye energy shot out. Ka. Space was easily torn apart and magnified several times, turning into a giant black hole. Hancock and Robin, along with Dustless himself, disappeared in an instant. The dark and dilapidated warehouse once again returned to silence and coldness. There was no sign of human habitation in the dark night sky. It was deathly still, isolated from the rest of the world. Ka. At this moment, a crisp explosion broke the deathly silence of the past. A large black hole appeared and 3 figures emerged from it. There was no doubt that only 3 people, Dustless, Hancock, and Robin, could appear in Kamui. A transparent coffin? A strange transparent coffin attracted Robin's attention. Lying in it was a woman. She was quite beautiful, but there were obvious traces of wrinkles in the corner of her eyes. Obviously she was old. Mother? Robin's tone was full of surprise, and tears came out of her eyes uncontrollably. All these years, the reason why Robin lived until now was because of her mother's will, otherwise she might have chosen to give up. Being chased endlessly by the Navy, anyone would be extremely irritated and fearful. It wasn't until Wu Chen's appearance that her former dark life was broken. She was able to live quietly and indifferently under the sun. She was able to breathe the air easily. She was no longer as secretive as before and lived a life of despair and oppression like a rat crossing the street. That's right. She is indeed your mother. She will come back to life immediately. Wu Chen vowed solemnly. It was just using his eye power to revive an ordinary human. This was nothing to him. It was as simple as eating and drinking. In fact, it was even simpler. Treating his subordinates with kindness and power was the only way to make them work harder. Especially now that Robin had joined the Straw Hat Pirates, Dustless resurrecting her mother was the original agreement. There was no need to go back on his words. He wasn't that kind of person, not to mention it was a small matter. Open the coffin. Robin nodded obediently. She then carefully removed the lid of the coffin. A cold aura of death emanated from the coffin, and Nico Olivia's frosty face entered her sight. She was motionless in the coffin, and her whole body was filled with decay. If it wasn't for the coffin's protection, she would have rotted many years ago. Can you do it, master? Seeing this scene, even Hancock, who trusted Dustless very much, couldn't help but doubt. Can you do it? This kind of question is meaningless. I can turn back time and I can also bring people back from the dead. I am an omnipotent being and I am also a demon who commits all kinds of evil. This kind of trivial matter is just a piece of cake for me. The line of sight suddenly focused on Robin's mother. Wu Chen's left eye also began to change rapidly. With a purple base, mysterious black ripples spread out with 9 deep and dark magatama hanging on it. It was Dustless's Rinnegan Sharingan. Robin and Hancock looked at each other nervously. Their white and tender palms exuded a little sweat as they stared at the unprecedented scene in front of them. Their breathing was much heavier than usual. Outer Path, Reincarnation. Chapter 732. Outer Path, Reincarnation. Along with Dustless's order, the malevolent Yama suddenly flashed, as if he had drilled out from hell without any warning. He opened his ferocious big mouth, enough to swallow all things in the world. Looking at the sudden appearance of this terrifying creature, Robin and Hancock instinctively retreated. Their faces were full of fear. They felt a deadly oppression from this ugly creature, which made their nerves a little confused. Don't worry, he's just a machine-like existence, he won't hurt anyone. Dustless showed a spring breeze smile, indicating that the 2 women didn't need to worry. This kind of creature from hell, ordinary humans would feel fear and panic, and it's also human nature. Kakaka? Immediately, under the shocked gaze of the 2 women, the mysterious creature opened his mouth, and a strange green light was spat out from it. The light was mysterious and full of vitality, and there was an indescribable magical power that seemed to be able to be reborn. In the blink of an eye, all the green light floated into the body of Robin's mother, and like a stone thrown into the sea, it was directly absorbed and swallowed by her. After using up all of the green light, the hideous Yama King finally disappeared. She's actually breathing? Hancock stared at Robin's mother, and she, who was already at the admiral level, clearly felt that Nico Orbia was breathing weakly. Although it was very weak, it was obvious that she could feel the residual heat in the air. She will be completely recovered soon. Robin and Hancock may not be able to see it, but Dustless's Sharingan's abnormal vision clearly saw that Nico Orbia's body was gradually recovering. The silent blood began to slowly flow again, and the completely stopped heartbeat gradually recovered, the frequency from slow to fast, and even her fingers began to move slightly. Immediately, under the horrified gaze of the two women, she finally opened her eyes that had been tightly closed. Robin. Orbia, who opened her eyes, asked in a trembling voice. She struggled to support her body, and subconsciously pinched her skin, thinking that she was dreaming. It wasn't until the severe pain spread all over her body that Orbia realized that it was not a dream but reality. How is this possible? Didn't I die? Orbia's lips trembled uncontrollably as she said in disbelief. Mother, it was young master who revived you. Tears flowed from the corners of Robin's eyes as she sobbed. He subconsciously looked at Dustless. In this strange and mysterious world he was the only male. Naturally, the young master that Robin had mentioned was on the verge of popping out. You are a celestial dragon? Her pupils instantly dilated several times, and Orbia suddenly jumped out of the coffin, protecting Robin's body. Her blank eyes were also filled with vigilance. Through the small part of the emblem exposed on Dustless's left chest, she instantly saw through Dustless's origins. In this world, no one dares to pretend to be a celestial dragon. Mother, you worry too much. Young master is indeed a celestial dragon, but there is an essential gap between him and those celestial dragons. Wiping the tears from the corner of his eyes, Robin indicated that there was no need to worry. What do you know? I know the history of the celestial dragons better than you. They are actually the culprits who rule the world behind the scenes. The Gorosei, 5 elder stars, and the Navy are their lackeys. Orbia still did not relax her vigilance and looked at Dustless as if she was facing an enemy. Her eyes were locked on him. Celestial dragons were synonymous with evil in the eyes of the scholars. Their evil was worse than the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. Don't be nervous if I want to do it. You are just a person who will return to the place where you came out before in a flash. The dead voice fell and Dustless also disappeared. What a fast speed. Celestial dragons have such a level of character? Sensing the chilly wind behind her, Orbia suddenly turned her head. In her beautiful eyes, there was an expressionless Dustless. That cold gaze was filled with contempt, as if he could kill her in an instant with just a thought. Orbia's chest rose and fell uncontrollably, and her delicate face was shocked, filled with horror and dullness. Thinking of Mariewa's group of celestial dragons who only know how to eat, drink and poop, and then comparing it with Dustless in front of her, she suddenly felt that her previous worldview was gradually collapsing. Don't think that you know everything. That's just your wishful thinking. This world is very big and people who can know all his secrets are useless and God is no exception. Glancing at Orbia, Dustless retracted his gaze and looked indifferently at the world in front of him. His pupils began to twist again, and the world in front of him began to change dramatically again. Once again he returned to the previous stinky warehouse. Hancock and Robin were okay after all, they had just experienced it once, but Orbia's face was directly frozen, and her whole person was motionless like a sculpture. Space instantly shifted and she came to another world. Thinking about it, she had a ridiculous feeling that this was a dream. Don't be so surprised, I said before, the things you have seen before are just the tip of the iceberg of this world. Celestial dragons, Gorosei, 5 elder stars, including the Navy and the so-called Jianghu 4 emperors. Maybe in the near future they will disappear forever. The world is progressing, and those who indulge in the past can only be swept into the garbage dump of history. His deep eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the world, and Dustless's eyes burned with flames of ambition. Chapter 733. Robin's mother stared blankly at the back of Dustless, and suddenly felt that the world in front of her was dark, as if she had encountered a legendary madman or a psychopath. As a celestial dragon he actually wanted to overthrow this decaying world. How could Orbia be calm? Robin, your young master is not a legendary madman. Otherwise, how could he overthrow his own rule? Orbia's eyes were filled with suspicion, and she had deep doubts about this. Hearing this, Robin didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at her surprised mother. She opened her mouth and wanted to persuade her carefully, but she found that she was speechless. To some extent, Dustless's approach was indeed crazy, and only an idiot would overthrow his own rule. The young master's heart is higher than the sky. How could he be willing to be that ridiculous celestial dragon? This narrow sky can't bind the young master who wants to spread his wings and rule the world with his own absolute strength. This is just the first step for the young master to set foot on the top. Compared with the dazed Robin, and her mother, Hancock, who had been accompanying Dustless all year round, was clear about Dustless's true thoughts and his ambitions. In other words, celestial dragons enjoyed a godlike status in this world, and everyone must kneel down and not have any blasphemy in their hearts. This was also what Dustless wanted to pursue. But there were many people who had this status, and there was a large group of Mariehua. What Dustless wanted to do was to eradicate the group of people except himself. That was all. She's really a lunatic. How could she do such a crazy thing? She set herself on fire. Orbia's eyes widened as she said in disbelief. Even because she was too excited, her voice was a little sharp and harsh, making people uncomfortable with goosebumps. The young master can do it. Compared with the skeptical Orbia, Hancock, who had been with Dustless for many years, nodded firmly. No one knew better than her how capable her young master was. In terms of strength, Dustless was an invincible existence in the world, and the forces he gathered in secret were extraordinarily enormous. Moreover, they were all extremely outstanding existences with strengths that were 1 in 10,000 experts. Ordinary people were unable to enter Dustless's attention. Hancock's fanatical eyes infected Robin, and she also looked at Dustless's back with a face full of obedience. Robin, don't forget that you are an archaeologist. Seeing her baby daughter like this, Orbia said solemnly, and her voice was a little depressed. Speechless, Orbia stared at Dustless's gradually dissipating back. She felt a headache coming on. As an archaeological researcher, she had to be careful and cautious about everything. The current Robin did not look like an outstanding archaeologist at all. Instead, he looked like a possessed religious follower. Their fervent gazes were filled with reverence as if they had seen a god. The world government is destined to be overthrown. This is not a coincidence, nor is it an accident, it's fate. Indifferently looking at the sun gradually setting in the distance, Dustless's eyes were particularly long and deep. Carefully looking at the distant sky, his eyes seemed to see the surface of prosperity, but the inside was rotten to the bottom of Mariehua. From the time I appeared in this world, the sovereignty of this era began to change its name. Time passed by quickly. Unknowingly, 5 days had passed silently between the gaps of his fingers. Dustless also allowed Robin to join the Straw Hat Pirates. Before that, she used a strategy to break into the Straw Hat Pirates and became an inseparable member of them. Marine Headquarters. As the most righteous island in the world, Marin Island, the sky was always clear and cloudless. The serene atmosphere on the island was intoxicating. Compared to the other war-torn islands in the New World, it was simply a paradise. The news that Crocodile was killed spread all over the world like a storm, and the relatively calm sea suddenly set off stormy waves. The fall of a generation of heroes, the shock that spread was unprecedented, and the whole world fell into an explosion of public opinion. Guessing who did it? Some things can't be concealed, and Sengoku didn't hide it and directly told the world the truth of the matter. Of course, the information about Pluton and the Revolutionary Army behind the scenes were all selectively concealed. Therefore, Dustless was inevitably pushed to the center of public opinion again. In the warm office, Dustless comfortably enjoyed the morning sun through the window, lazily arched his body, intending to take a nap, but suddenly there was a depressed sigh beside him. Garp, there's no need to be sad, your grandson has a bounty of 100 million berries and he defeated Crocodile. This is the government's recognition of his strength, and you should be happy. At this moment, Garp's face was black, and his old eyes sometimes shot a cold light. His big hands trembled slightly, and the bounty list he was holding was the smiling Luffy. The bounty has also risen from the original 30 million berries to 100 million berries. Luffy's strength has attracted the attention of the Marines since he defeated a veteran pirate like Crocodile. The bounty has more than doubled. Happy? His strength can improve and he defeated Crocodile. This old man is indeed gratified. Unfortunately, he has embarked on a path of no return. The complex and bleak sigh was filled with guilt and self-blame, and there was a little failure. Dorag stood on the opposite side of him and became the world's most evil wanted criminal. He hoped that Luffy would be able to wash away his shame and embark on the road of absolute justice. As a result, because of Red Hair Shanks, he became a pirate that caused a sensation in the world. Chapter 734. Glancing at Garp's face, he seemed to have aged a few decades in an instant, his face was slightly dirty, his back was bent, and he looked unusually old. Gazing at Garp with a little sympathy, this old guy is indeed a marine, but as a family elder he is indeed a failure. Garp wanted his son to become a dragon, but the result was the opposite. Dolag and Luffy were indeed dragons and phoenixes, but they stood on the opposite side of Garp. Crocodile has been removed from the list, and there are still 2 Shichibukai positions left. Sengoku doesn't seem to have a suitable candidate. Thinking of the vacant Shichibukai position, Dustless changed the topic. Dustless, who had intended to recommend his own people, shut up. If he doesn't say it, he may be promoted. If he says it, he may be excluded forever. Not for the time being. You also understand that the pirate suitable for Shichibukai, whether it is strength or influence, must reach a certain level, at least to deter the pirates of other seas. Garp also had a headache. Not everyone can be a Shichibukai. Some people who are not at ease with the government, including those who hate Marines, are even more disdainful of Shichibukai. That's right. Dustless nodded undeniably. His eyes quietly looked at the busy port below. On the wide playground he saw the dense Marines, carrying out high-density training, sweating. Then he raised his eyes to the right and he could clearly see that the Marine Force's scientific force was sitting in a tense repair work. The turret was updated, the defense was strengthened, and many underground mechanisms were being replaced. Although all this was done very secretly and no one in the outside world knows, Dustless, as an admiral of the Marine headquarters, knows it clearly. All of this indicates one thing. This era has gone berserk. These guys. It seems that they are going to attack one of the Jianghu 4 emperors. Dustless secretly guessed while glancing at the silent Garp. There is no doubt that the strength of the Marine has expanded to an unprecedented level. The 4 admirals, including Dustless, have awed the entire sea and ushered in a new era. Apart from the 4 admirals, the top powerhouses in the Marine, including Sengoku and Garp, have reached the level of an admiral or even beyond the level of an admiral. They are enough to openly fight any Jianghu 4 emperors. After the Marine strength reached a bottleneck, they would inevitably choose to attack the Jianghu 4 emperors. The Marines' task was originally to eliminate pirates all over the world. It was reasonable for Sengoku to take the initiative to deal with the Whitebeard pirates. The emperor is old. Dustless couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. The Whitebeard pirates were bright on the outside, but they were rotten on the inside. If Whitebeard fell, this pirate group that was almost unstoppable in the sea for an era was bound to collapse. The war between the Marines and Whitebeard is not an accident or a coincidence, but an inevitable result of various reasons. Jianghu 4 emperors seem to be the strongest, but there is no doubt about it, but once Whitebeard is lost, this pirate group will be useless. Secondly, Whitebeard is an old man of the previous era. He is on par with the pirate King Roger and Golden Lion Shiki. Roger and Golden Lion Shiki have both died, and the significance of destroying Whitebeard is self-evident. This era is out of control and it will eventually lead to destruction. Looking at the busy figures below, Garp said with emotion. As a high-level Marine, he naturally knew why the Marines were so busy. Everything was to prepare for the future war. Whitebeard is old and weak, and it is best to use his blood to commemorate the end of the old era. My opinion is different. At this moment, Dustless suddenly opened his mouth and laughed, looking at the sky in the distance. I think this is the beginning of a new era. Winter goes and spring comes, and the destruction is also a new beginning. It seems that I have to give Fire Fist Ace to Sengoku in the near future. The hesitation in his eyes turned into determination, and Dustless decided in his heart. When one should be decisive, one should be decisive. As for Garp, Dustless could only apologize. Although their relationship was not bad, their standpoints were as different as heaven and earth. Dustless was a selfish person from beginning to end. He would never abandon his own plan for Garp. Somewhere on an island in the New World. Eek. How many ability users are there? The gloomy and arrogant laughter burst out, and the surrounding area has been turned into ruins, and the ground is bare as if it has been swallowed up with bones, which is particularly terrible. The surrounding area is dead, and the corpses emitting black gas can be seen. Captain, when will we leave the Whitebeard pirates? Now there is no need to continue living under someone else's roof. We can be independent. It's really uncomfortable to listen to the command of the old man Whitebeard all day long. Looking closely, Blackbeard and his companions were gnawing on burnt barbecue. And the people who were being hunted around were the ability users that Blackbeard had sniped. After killing them one by one, he would devour their abilities and use them for himself. During this period of time, Blackbeard had been doing the same thing day after day. You're wrong. Temporary forbearance is not a kid. If you can't hold back your restless temper, then you are a kid. I have endured for decades, let alone a few days. As long as I think the opportunity is right, I will immediately attack Whitebeard and take his ability. Blackbeard's eyes glowed with a gloomy smile. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.